Hi, everybody. Welcome to the project talks for Bodies in Residency. Um, I'm Julian Belbonton. I'm the community and social media manager at Bodies in Play. Now that our residency is wrapping up, we have our fantastic residents sharing what they've been working on throughout the whole month. Just like the launch showcase at the beginning, we're going to be listening to each resident, their process, and what they're thinking during the process. Um, Firstly, we're going to have either Kate or Ellie talk about Bodies in Play as a whole, and we have our presentation.
All you, Ellie.
Yes. So, hello everyone. Welcome to our live open house and also project talks. It's really amazing that we're going through the whole month of February and now it's coming to the end. I feel like yesterday was still doing the launch event. Next slides, please. Okay, so as always, we'll start with the land acknowledgement. OK University acknowledges the ancestral territories of the Mississauga of the Credit, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Huron-Wendat, who are the original owners and custodians of the land on which we live, work, and create. Next. And here is our team. And we sing, maybe interact with one another during the in-person, and there are just to say thank you to our TAs and also staff who are providing support and help along the way. And next slide. So before going to today's official residence sharings, we will share a bit of the photo documentations of what we had of going through the in-person intensives that people actually come together. And even though I wasn't able to be there, but trying to dig up some photos was really a great moment for me, and to see how people actually has discovered some new things, work with each other, and looks really fun. So that was from the first date. And well, I don't really have more descriptions other than that. Next. And then yeah, we started with some tutorials, workshops on wearables, on VRs, and then going to tinkering, creating, and making some stuff. The next slide. And I think the photo on the right is inviting a wider audience to come to the in-person open house. And on the left is a group photo of our residents. Next slide. So after the first intensive weeks, we go into the hybrid working months, and most residents worked online and in a self-paced asynchronous format. So not to spoiler too much, I just put some Discord snapshots here, showing that people are having some works during the process, but we won't really show too much. So that's there will be more to come in the following talks. The next slide. Okay, so for today's schedule, the first is the introduction, and then we'll just go straight ahead into residence sharing. The first names are Jessica, Kay, and then Olivia and Shalaka. Then we'll go to a discussion about the previous presentations, projects, some questions, and any open threads that we want to talk about or discuss. We go into a break for 10 minutes, and then it's the second part of the section led by Max, Lee, Lane, and Michelle. In the end, we will do another round of discussion, Q&A, and the reflection upon the whole process, and to see what has gone well, what didn't go that well, and what can be improved better in the future. So that's our today's schedule, and we will get started. Next slide. All right, so the first one is Jessica. Are you ready to go?
Yes. Hi, everyone. I will share my screen. Yeah. almost there. Yeah. So good. Okay, so I changed my photo. The last photo you show for the new photo they take to me in the Open Studio when I was showing my work. So yeah, I'm Jessica. I am working with mostly with the VR and XR, immersive technology, let's say. And for this residency, I came mostly to keep working on my work, my research recreation project called Pinch to Awaken, which is in a VR experience that mostly uses breathing as a means of navigation. For that, I have developed wearable interfaces as controller to use in the experience. And yeah, I mean, my goal was like keep working on it because it's a big prototype. It's a functional prototype, but having like yeah, I mean, I need to improve many little stuff in each part of the experience that I will show you today. I will talk today about it. So, okay, mostly this is a quick explanation of how it works. I mean, it's the user, the input of the old experience is the breath of the user, which is kind of stimulate for the virtual environment. And in that way, it's create a feedback loop that, yeah, create a kind of responsive environment. So every time the user breathes, it's like similar to like a touch a button of the joystick, let's say, and is how the experience unfolds. And for the exhibition, I have been like developing a performance, and this is photos of the moment I exhibit the performance in the gallery. Is about objects and garments and signification of the space in which I create the storytelling as an excuse to put to help to the user to where all these sensors are developed. So this is a little bit about what's happening inside the experience, but I just want to mention that I never in like showing too much what happened inside the experience, because it's not just what's happening inside the headset. It's the whole experience that for me is most important, right? And okay, I will talk about one of the specific things I have been like working on in this residency, which are the controllers, right? This is the first version of the controllers. So it's me wearing all these enormous controllers in my body, which were very uncomfortable. But I mean, this is the root of my idea, right? Like the idea of alternative controllers, right? In which this is some of the principles of the idea of a paper that came from TAG, as an study games field, that talk about like let's the players remember that they have a body, right? And let them interact with something that is not plastic, like the joystick. So this is one of the last stage of the interfaces. But of course, this have to keep improving because, yeah. So I am sharing here some of the last version of the many interaction I did. It's mostly a conductive yarn that react when the fabric is stretched. That means like when the user breathes, expand your chest and your belly, and it's the way that the sensor knows the user is breathing, right? So yeah, here's more about it. And finally, yeah, well, a little more about it. This is all of my version I have been working these days, these years actually. And this is the garment I use as a performer to characterize myself as a character that guides to the user to introduce in the virtual world. Notice that I've been working with yarn, and I choose this material because I like the tactile sensation that brings, right? So, okay, this is the work in the residency with the help of Olivia, which is, I really appreciate your help because she knows that she's a genius and how to manage these machines. Here's the video when she was like trying to show Shalaka and me to teach how to deal with this infinite amount of needles. But anyway, she helped me to knit the fabric that I need. And this is one of the models we create together, which was not working at all. But yeah, I mean, I back to my old notes, and this is two of the version made with conductive yarn that works at the end, right? And this is me doing a lot of, it's like many hours, like trying out these conductive yarns in different way to use it in my body. Yeah, so this is more of the experimentation. I mean, this work has been like a kind of combined with electronics, calculus, and the materiality itself of the interface, right? And how the user has to breathe to make it works. And here are the two fabrics I developed these days, which are working very well with two different kind of conductive yarn. And finally, this is the testing on my body, right? Because this last testing in my hand when you stretch the fabric is working very well, but the challenge part is like create a wearable piece that also have to be functional, right? So, okay, this is another aspect of the work I have been doing. As I said, the electronic part is important. So I've been like back to open my sensor again and change the resistors of the circuit, and also working a lot with this interface between Unity, Arduino, and Wi-Fi connections to try to communicate my sensors to Unity actually. I have been also improving my calibration code, which is the key. It's very important to have a good calibration code to use in biosensing. So yeah, this code was provided by Olivia, also that helped me in this part, and she gave me a code, and I start to polish the code to get what I want. But even though I keep working on it, and for example, this is another tool I have been trying to use. Is interact machine learning algorithms in Unity with the aim to classify the data of the breath. Because, I mean, biosensing is one of the most difficult things to sense. I mean, the human body is like providing a lot of data if you sense the human body. So it's very important to have a good classification and process of all the data. So this was one of my attempts to do it, like classify the data. So I start to exploring this, but I have to like apply it in my project, which is big work also. But I think it's something I would like to do in the near future. On the other hand, I have been working with Trish. Thank you, Trish, for helping me to print and 3D many of my prototyping stuff. For example, to cover the sensor and also to let's say to attach the conductive fabric to the straps, and also this invention I create for gather the headset. So thank you, Trish, for helping me with this. And okay, the other aspect of the project, I actually was one of the most important things I came here to try, is to create to conduct a play testing, right? As any games, everybody knows it needs like a lot of play testing, and in this case, is crucial because the interface are where in the body. So of course I test with my own body all the time at the moment I am developing, but the challenge part is make it work in all the bodies, right, in the body of the users. So I have been the pleasure of receiving part of the team of this residency to try out the experience. And Cindy, Kate, Emma, thank you. Also, Ria, Tyler, and Trish, they provide me your time and also a very valuable feedback after the trial experience. And yeah, I mean, this is my workspace here in the game lab, gameplay lab, where I am now. And this is my mess these days when a lot of stuff are over the table because I was like jumping from coding, from electronics, from knitting, from putting the straps, and yeah, also some books that I am really grateful to, because I take with me a lot of knowledge, reference, and recommendations from the feedback that everybody gives to me. Yeah, mostly this is part of the work I've been doing, and this project is keep going because it's a big prototype, as I said. But after this residency, I mean, I'm very happy because I really take with me a lot of good reference and valuable feedback. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Asika, for the presentation. That was super cool. And also seeing you have done a lot of stuff, like from wearable, textile, then to XR, and then doing play testing. That was a lot of work for the whole month. I'm very glad to see the whole process. And yeah, thank you so much. So next one, we'll have Kate. Hello, Kate.
Hello. Let me just share my screen. Hang on 1 second. Oh. Sorry, started in the middle for some reason. All right. Is my stuff coming through? There we go. Hi, everyone. My name is Kay. I won't get too much into my background and stuff because I'm not sure how many people here are people who I've been speaking with for the whole month versus new folks who may have just dropped in. But just to recap, like a lot of my background is in costume design and graphic design. I'm a current grad student at the Interactive Telecommunications program at NYU. And a lot of what I've been focusing on is electronics in costuming, so like wearable electronics generally. I'm also like finally allowed to share this thing that I made for Drag Race, so I wanted to put it into the slide because I'm excited about it. It had like fans in these like gigantic triangular shoulder pieces that like blew the wearer's hair around. And this didn't make it to air on the show, but it got featured in one of their like ancillary YouTube things. So I'm excited that I'm allowed to show it to people now. Yeah, so a lot of what I was doing during the Bodies in Residency was working on a prototype for a wearable LED grid. The idea differing from existing ones in a couple of ways. One, that like I am like a fashion and costume design person, so I really wanted to bring in elements of like couture fashion, costume design, like a really polished finish. I really wanted to showcase the components themselves as opposed to trying to cover them up. So a lot of existing LED grids that you can buy are often like mounted onto fabric or like covered with fabric in a way that like diffuses the LEDs and like creates a really interesting display, but is sort of trying to create this magic effect of light with like while hiding the technological components that are like creating that. And I really wanted to showcase it instead because I think that those can be really beautiful. And then the other thing was that I wanted to create a grid that the flexibility came from the techniques that were used to join rigid materials as opposed to mounting them onto like a piece of flexible plastic or fabric. So this slide here, I wanted to sort of go back to where my initial inspiration had come from for this project. I was thinking about it the other day, and I'm excited about all of these references, so I wanted to share them. I was looking a lot at the work of this couture designer, Guo Pei, who is fantastically talented, doing like really beautiful, amazing sculptural high fashion. And I actually think that these specific pieces of hers really stuck out to me, particularly the dress with all the rhinestones all the way over on the side here. That was the one that I like looked at and I was like, oh, the way that all those rhinestones are linked together, like you could do with LEDs. LEDs feel to me very jewel-like this is a rigid object being linked together to create a flexible mesh with the rhinestones, the same way that you could do with LEDs. So that was like my origin point. And then this other piece that I have like the detail shot of, and then also the full body shot of, I just like am obsessed with the texture of. I think it's mostly like wire work on top of fabric. I'm actually not entirely sure what the technique is, but it like feels so electrical. It's very like showcasing the intricacy and delicacy of like all of these unusual components to like create a very high fashion texture. And then like as I've been researching and looking at fashion, some like inspirations that have come up more recently in the last couple of weeks as I've been working on this project were this like Delaria Findle silverware dress from last fall, autumn winter 2023, which like someone wore on the red carpet, so it's been like making the rounds. But it's again like a rigid object made flexible by the way that it's like mounted together, which I think is really interesting. The center one is a wearable LED runway fashion that Alexander McQueen did for, I believe, for Givenchy. So before he was doing his own line. And they're also like not trying to hide the LEDs. It's from 1995, I think, or 96. So it's early in like the timeline of like physical computing and like decorative computing. And then also I just, as I was researching like chainmail dresses today, because that was also like a touchstone for me, sort of generally, I had the idea of using chainmail as sort of like a layering couture fashion piece. But I hadn't like been able to source the sort of designer original source of that. Also, I'm so sorry, my dog is barking. I wish she would not right now. But as I was researching more about like the history of chainmail on in like runway fashion, I found the work of Paco Rabanne, who in like 1966 did this collection called 12 Unwearable Dresses that was all dresses linked together, made out of metal and plastic linked together with chain links. So like very much in the vein of what I've been doing. But if you look at that last photo here, it feels so of an era for like 60s and 70s, like futuristic mod fashion. I think it's like a really iconic look that I actually like didn't know the origin of. I'm also obsessed with the like cowl style he has going on in these two dresses. They're so cool. So I'm sort of synthesizing all of these aesthetically into the work that I'm doing. Stuff that I did this month. I learned PCB design in Autodesk Fusion, which is really exciting to me. I have like some circuit design experience, but not tons. So the software is all new. And then I also learned how to cut PCBs on the Bantam Other Mill, which is like an at home, like a DIY PCB milling machine that I'm lucky enough to have access to in my shop here at NYU. And I believe there's also some at the OCAD shop. But these are like schematics and early PCB designs. This one that's like on the tip of my finger was the second one that I cut, and it is actually too small to be usable. But I think it's very cute. And then these are all of the prototypes that I did of just like the PCB shape over the course of the last month. So there's 5 different ones here. The very top corner one here is the mirrored acrylic that I laser cut while I was at OCAD. It was sort of the general shape. I was still figuring out if I was going to use PCBs as the backing. The next one over is this like horribly messed up PCB that I cut when I didn't understand how to lay out files. If you know anything about PCB design, this is like a useless piece of garbage that I accidentally got the other mill to make. And then I sort of got things figured out and moving, and I was able to like prototype linking them together with non-conductive chain that I got from a fabric like Notions and trim store here in New York. So I'm really, really excited about the movement and the texture of this. And I had also originally intended to eventually have these PCBs professionally made and have them covered with solder mask, which is like the sort of opaque covering that's often like green that you see on circuit boards. But I kind of fell in love with the copper just on its own. I think it's so beautiful. So I am like moving forward with that as the very deliberate aesthetic of it. This is the mini LED grid that I built while I was at OCAD. This is mostly this was like my big project while I was in person in Toronto. This thing was great for troubleshooting, and also like I'm a person who learns by doing things hand-on. So just getting in there and like building one smaller scale LED grid really like prepared me for making the bigger scale final. And then also like let me troubleshoot things like I can sort of like recognize hardware errors a lot better because I was stuck on solving some problems with this for a really long time. The GIF that's playing is what happened when I first plugged it in, and there's actually like some wiring errors that are causing it to like make those big blocks of light instead of like text, which is what it's supposed to be doing. And here's the version that I am at right now and what got finished this week. So this is all of those tiny PCBs linked together. The one big kind of mistake that I made with this was I used solid core wire to solder everything together. And that made the whole thing really rigid. Let me see if I can actually, well, I don't know if you all can see my video or if I'm just here, but if you hold that up, it's very rigid. It's like a sheet. It doesn't sort of have the same movement as that sample swatch, unfortunately. I'm working on a solve for that. I think I need to use like stranded wire. And the reason that I hadn't done that initially was that it was just way easier to assemble with the solid core. I was able to like poke it up through the back and then solder it in place for this version, which was like quite easy if like just repetitive. And the stranded wire, it's a lot harder to do that with. But I got some good pointers about returning again, I think, to like jewelry making techniques and using like some clasps and closures and techniques that they use in jewelry to make the stranded wire a little bit easier to work with and to retain the flexibility that I'm like really looking for in the final. The first GIF here is it actually says bodies in residence. It's maybe so low resolution that you can't read it, but the text that's scrolling by, just if you like squint and stand back from your computers, maybe you can see it. Yeah, and then I also today, like as I was putting this presentation together and kind of reflecting on the whole experience, I wanted to like reflect back on the soft toolkit, which was a sort of like series of reference points that Kate and Emma and Cindy had brought up for like restorative design and ways of thinking about residencies and collaborative work within the tech space. And I just wanted to like think about the ways that my work plays into that, because I do think like everyone in this residency sort of intuitively uses a lot of those approaches. And I think specifically for me, like using fashion and the aesthetic appeal of like physical computing is to make it feel really like fun and approachable and like accessible to people who are like not traditionally in the demographics that like tech is catered towards or told that tech is an accessible career for. I also think like a lot of my projects and a lot of the projects in this residency generally seem to come with like an intuitive interaction with technology. So like a non-traditional physical engagement. So you're not like sitting at a computer using a mouse, but so much of my work is about like putting it on and experiencing that, or seeing it from the audience point of view, and the interaction feeling very like seamless and natural, as opposed to like something where you spend a lot of time, you know, like interfacing. I guess I don't know if I'm like articulating that well, but yeah. And then also a lot of my work, and particularly with this project, is I've been thinking a lot about returning to techniques not traditionally considered in like technology and electrical engineering, in order to solve problems. So like for this one in particular, I'm returning a lot to like craft making and jewelry making as like ways to solve tech issues. And I think that that really is a way of like acknowledging the value in these techniques that are like minimized against like the sort of very polished and like like a high tech perception of technology. And then I also I've been reading Glitch Feminism, which I think is like a really fun a really fun book about like resistance and bodies and the relation to technology. And there's a line that really stood out to me about how for people of marginalized identities, just existence at all is like a form of resistance. And then there was a line that was activism that unfolds with boundless extravagance, which really spoke to me. And I really like a lot the idea of just existing and like making beautiful and exciting and engaging work being like an extravagant form of like activism and resistance. And then this is moving forward, like next steps for me and this project. Solving the rigidity thing is kind of my biggest next step. Like I said, I think I'm gonna use some traditional jewelry making techniques and some stranded wire to solve those issues. I wanna scale it up. So right now, the grid that I showed is an 8x8. It's probably like 8 inches by 11 inches. So it's about the size of a sheet of paper. So I want to scale this up and link in multiple grids. The hardware that I have should support, I believe, up to like 16 of those all linked together technically. So I should be good on that. I really want to experiment with different variations, different shapes and forms of the PCB grids themselves. I'll show on the next slide, but I've been looking at some like alternative shapes that I think I'm gonna play with. And then I also am sort of trying to answer the question now, which was like a thing that I have gone back and forth on over the course of the month of like, is this eventually going to be packaged as a teaching tool or kit, which is a thing that like I had discussed as being initially part of this project. And I sort of have waffled a couple times between it being like an art piece with good documentation versus like deliberately being a teaching tool. I think there's some ways to go before it's something that could like just be handed off to other people to experiment with, but I am still hopeful that that's like a goal that I reach in the future. I think like the documentation and like simplifying the backend circuit are kind of the two big things that need to happen. And then also the assembly of this was pretty labor intensive because I had to solder 64 times like 6 joints, which is probably pretty intimidating for a lot of folks. So I'd love to find some, if this is to be a thing that like is meant for everyone to use easily, some less intense way to make that assembly possible. These are some of the alternative shapes that I'm looking at. I was looking at tile techniques and the way that tiles are stacked to think about the way you can tessellate different shapes together. So I really love this like star shape, and I think it also plays back into the like aesthetics that I was looking at with fashion. So I'm hoping to make one that the PCBs are in this sort of star shape. And thank you to Bodies in Residency and everyone at OCAD and the whole team, and all of the residents are, you know, both the people who were helping us and the residents themselves who were participating in this. Everyone was so fantastic. I learned so much, and it was a really wonderful experience and month. So thanks.
Thank you so much. That was a great presentation. And I really love your quote, the activism that unfolds boundless extravagance. Or I remember it. That was super cool. And a quick question. So you mentioned this is going bigger. Is it going bigger in form and shapes? Is it going to be a costume in the end, or?
I think it will be a full-sized wearable piece. So I'm hoping for the final form to be like dress-sized. So I'm thinking like a fairly simple dress design, like a sheath dress. So that scale, the actual PCBs and LEDs are going to stay the same size. So it'll just be the number of them will be increased. And I don't know. I mean, like, it's sort of hard to figure out what the line is between like costume and fashion and wearable art. Like, I think it's going to live like somewhere in between all of those. And I don't inherently have like a performance planned to use it for. Although I'm like hopeful that it'll be pretty sturdy actually by the end form. So I don't know. I think it's like somewhere in between all of those, but certainly wearable, and hopefully like the final like photography and documentation will be like of someone actually wearing it.
Cool. I do see that have a very strong sense of link to Guopei's style of costume that has like the rigid format in it, but also a sense of aesthetic. That was really cool. And I never thought about using PCB and connecting that together, and also with LEDs. It's like a very cool combination that I never thought about before, and turns out great. And another comment, sorry, I have a lot of comments.
Okay.
And another is that actually really reminds me of like ancient armors in several Eastern countries, like when they used to dress at the wall by consist of like metal chips. And that's in a similar way of weaving, but also core metals. So there is how you mentioned about originally you thought about using engineering thinkings to solve tech issues, but now using a more crafting perspective to solve problems. So in the end, I felt like the original project that you have a more soft outcome, but in this way, when you reverse the perspective, in the end has a different, more harder feeling. Yeah, I finished my comment.
No, I think that's exactly right. And like, I think specifically the idea of the form of a rigid object, like the way you work with a rigid object, potentially making it be able to be flexible is like really interesting to me. And that's also a good note about armor, because I was thinking of chainmail definitely as like the reference I keep getting, which is like the Western version. But I should look at some East Asian armor, because I think I've seen the kind that you're talking about where it's like chips of metal that are linked together. I should go track that down because I've seen it, but I wasn't like deliberately thinking of that as a reference point.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So, hi, Kate.
Hi. Yeah, I think we're just taking a couple of questions before our next presenter arrives, but I have some for both Jessica and Jessica and Kay. But yeah, I guess, oh no, now I have to formulate them. Well, first of all, I'll just share that I got to try Jessica's project today, and it was like the best thing that happened during my day. So thank you for that. But I'm so impressed by the depth of it in so many different areas. So, it's like, because there's this whole like e-textile controller, and then there's this, VR experience, and there's this performance, and yeah, I guess for me, I'm curious, just if you could talk a little bit more about your kind of motivation behind the work, and this focus on breath and physicality and embodiment, because you seem to have such deep, I don't know, kind of like artistic and research interests, and
in this moment that you're creating for people that I think is really generous.
Thanks, Kate. Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, well, I could talk a little bit about the moment in which started to create this piece. I mean, it's my master thesis. It's my master thesis research creation, and I started to develop the whole research and the creation during pandemic. So, was my inspiration for this piece is yoga meditation. Although I don't want present the project as a kind of simulation of the meditation or mindfulness or yoga or whatever, but at the end, when you finish the experience, of course you realize, I mean, where this is the place where this come from, the inspiration, right? Because it's all about breathing, and mostly. Yeah, I mean, in that moment, I have been before start my research, I have been working in 360 video, immersive video, and always have the question about the body, right? Where is the body of the user? At the moment you look your own body, I mean, your avatar, and mostly in 360 video, you're like floating in the space, right? So as I come also with my background in cinema production, it's like the question is, where is the point of view? Where is the point of view of the user in which you want to tell the story, right? So with this all in mind, at the moment I start to dive into immersive technology, more interactive, like in video games, actually in Unity. The first things I have in mind was like create a natural interaction, natural gesture interaction, right? Like you can move your own body and don't use anymore like buttons, controllers, slides. I mean, no, please. You know, we already have our entire life to keyboards and so on. So yeah, that is when the idea come from, and mostly, let's say, yeah, I mean, it's easier to do a critic to technology because we are immersed in technology all the time, and one of the most critical, of course, is surveillance, and it's also on the other side, it's like a technology grabs all our attention, right? Is we are like all the time looking at the screens in the street, in the phone. So in this case, yes, I work with technology. I work with the most new technology, which is immersive technologies. And I create a lot of stuff around you, a lot of technology to make you aware of your own body again, right? It's like kind of contradictory. But yeah, basically that is what I do, right? Is for me, one of the most effective way to back to the body, to back the attention inwards, is the breath, right? That's something I learned in my yoga practices. So I combine this idea of technology, my interest in immersing technology and the body in VR and in these technologies. The best way I find to combine was, yeah, of course, use VR, which is a technology in which we, for the first time, we have to wear a headset to enter in VR. So from that, I start to put more wearables in your body, more interfaces in your body to navigate this virtual world in a natural way, let's say. And at the end, to give the user kind of limbs. It's like, hey, you have a body, you can breathe. And what happens if you breathe this way or this way? Yeah, something happens around you. So yeah, I think this was the best answer I get now for your question.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, I really appreciate those insights. And yeah, that resonates a lot in the experience I had with your work. So, and then Kate, I just wanted to circle back to the point that you were addressing at the end of your presentation about whether the thing I'm just using the thing is an art project of your, whether it's focused around your own practice or whether it's a teaching tool, because I very much relate to that that feeling and being pulled in both directions. But I guess what I like, just an offering I'd make is sometimes getting well, first of all, like always indulge in using it for your own work, because that just, the more, as you say, like, learning through doing, the more you use it, the more you discover about it. But also, before kind of like making something that's a proper teaching tool, just finding other creatives, like two people. Like, I've had the experience of doing a prototype of a toolkit and just letting two other people use it, and there's so much to learn with that. So but yeah, I think that's like a career long question.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's such good feedback to like, even just reach out to a few folks to test it. And I think like where I am landing with it right now is to just like follow what's interesting and exciting about it to me personally. And like, as I'm learning that way and documenting that way, like, if I move forward with making it a teaching tool later, it will like only reinforce my own understanding of it and how to like explain that to other people and make it like usable and interesting to others. So I'm trying to be like, I don't have to do all of those parts all at once. I can like just kind of have fun with it and make it like beautiful and engaging to me for now. And like it can evolve into a thing that is like useful to other people, down the road.
Yeah. And also, like, you imagining with it helps other people imagine how it could be used.
Thank you.
One of the questions I had was around sort of like connectiveness and also differences. So for me, having had the chance to be in Jessica's work, it seems very inward facing. It's about sort of that type of contemplative reflection on my lived experience. And when I see your work, Kay, it's about signaling out to other people. And I was really curious about these sort of themes of interiority and exteriority, and whether you can sort of see connections between your practices given those different orientations of what you're working through.
I mean, I definitely can. I think like we're both of our interfaces are wearable. I think we're very interested in the way that like bodies move within those controllers. And I mean, I won't speak for Jessica's work, but like I do think we were both like getting really excited about like ways to connect things and like register like movement and interaction within those pieces, which was like really fun when we were all working together in the same space. Yeah, I don't know. What do you think, Jessica? What's your feeling about the way our stuff's connected?
Yeah, I mean, I've been connected stuff since a long time. I don't know. Sorry, I think I kind of lost the question, Emma.
Yeah, sorry. It's been such a rich experience that I know that your work's going to provide so much food for thought and consideration. I know for me personally over the next several months. So it's a bit of an unfair question to ask you right at this particular moment in time with your processes. But I'm curious about where you see your connections between your work, given this sort of shift of interest between the internal or the interior, which I see with your work, Jessica, and this communicative form that Kay's been making. I just sort of wanted to sort of hear what your very fresh thoughts were about the conceptual connections between some of your interests. Yeah. And it's a really unfair question because it's like a slap back.
Yeah, I can do a connection about the exteriority of like design garment as like a something to show. So, yeah, it's to show off something you have inside. And yeah, in my case, I'm not come from that background of design garment, but I just humble create the garment with my scarf, which my mom made to me. Yeah, I mean, just like a fine stuff I have close to me, which is yarn. And even I couldn't find to knit it, but I felt like I in my case, I create a connection, and I was able to kind of justify the use of this material like yarn, right? Because in my work, I try to create some kind of situation in which the user and the performance are in touch together through the materiality of the garment, of my garment, and the interface I made for the use. And yeah, in my case, I mean, I think thinking in the materiality is and keep trying to use this yarn, which is the conductive yarn with the interfaces I'm developing is not easier to create. I mean, it's working, but it's not working all the time. But I keep insisting in using this because yeah, the sensation that the materiality could give you, right, after touch. And also that is giving me more ideas. And after I tried experience with you, Emma, that gave me a glimpse about, yeah, you told me you had this kind of willing to touch the light and to touch and to grab your breath, right? I think this is one of the path I will work in the future is to combine more the performative part in the piece, and to create more touch wearable stuff that could be also reactive, right? So it's the way to, yeah, I mean, if I propose you the materiality of your breath, how it could be, right? Could be yarn, one of the answers. And yeah, I mean, it's kind of the way to show off our inwards through touch. And I think in the case of in Kate, I mean, she have a lot of incredible garment design in the webpage, and I think it's the LED is a beautiful thing to show off all this spectacularity she's trying to create with these incredible designs. So yeah, it's beautiful what she's doing.
Yes, thank you.
You could also maybe, I think, make an argument that both of our pieces are kind of about externalizing internal processes in a way. You know, I think there's an argument to be made that fashion, when you're deliberate about fashion and what you're wearing on your body, it's like you're communicating something externally, the same way that visualizing a subconscious internal process like breath is in VR, which I think is an interesting link between them.
Yeah, thank you. That's really rich. Thanks.
Thank you. And thanks for posing all the questions. So coming up, we'll have our last presenters of the first part of our resident talk, and that's Olivia and Shalaka. Off you go.
Hello. I'm just gonna check. Shalaka, are you there? Hello.
Yes, hello. I'm not backstage anymore. Just checking.
No, you are front stage. You're front stage.
Okay,
You're here. Okay, amazing.
I'm so sorry, everyone. My camera is not working, but you can hear my voice, so that I think will carry for the rest of this, hopefully.
I am just getting our presentation up here. Okay. Thank you, Jessica and Kay, for such lovely and thoughtful work. I love seeing the documentation of everything, and I'm so happy that, Jessica, we were finally able to get the knit sensors working. So that's something that was a big win, part of the residency for me as well. So Shalaka and I are going to be sharing our experimentations on kind of the question we were stewing upon, which is, where do you feel language in your body?
Mhm. Yeah, and so when we first sort of set out to embark on this residency and this collaboration, we'd had a couple of conversations about languages that we grew up around, but maybe learned a little bit and didn't really, we didn't have any fluency around, but there were phrases that sort of like knocked around in our minds, and we were really curious about using wearables and e-textiles to think about that sort of language learning and language reconnection journey. And I think very quickly we realized that the language learning piece wasn't necessarily where we wanted to focus our efforts during the residency. One, because there are lots of tools to learn a language, and that wasn't really the output that we wanted for this piece. But rather, we were thinking a lot about what it would mean to create a wearable that helped us feel some of the feelings we were having around language in the body and where it's stored, and some of the questions sort of evolved to the ones on the screen. So what are the postures and gestures of language learning in the body? Can they be mirrored? And where does language live in the body? And these were just more interesting places for us to land in terms of considering embodiment, considering the sort of like unspoken weight that is in our bodies, and that was just really prevalent in our conversations with one another. And so these are sort of some of the starting questions that, during our intensive got actually edited pretty dramatically.
There were lots of questions. Shalaka and I both love talking. So part of our scoping and narrowing in was focusing on phrases. So this is where we started to kind of think about, like, where do we feel these particular phrases in our own bodies? How do our bodies respond to them? And they're both based off of phrases that one of our grandparents would use to either like call us over, ask us intentionally. It's more so I say it for my grandparent. She would say "hotch too," which means "come here," and then Shalaka.
And then my grandfather would say "tuzi tabet bariyahe," which means "is your health well?" Which I grew up as sort of an I grew up hearing that as an alternative to "how are you?"
So in week one, kind of to what Shalaka was saying, is that we were moving away from the language learning and not really thinking about comprehension or what does it have to me feel like it's we're fully understanding what is being spoken around us, but more thinking about how do our bodies relate to it. And so fairly similar to Jeska's work, we focused in on more somasthetics and thinking about how can we bring attention to the embodied interactions that we feel as we are like recalling these phrases. So we started off by ideating lots of questions over and over and over again. But we just also started to think about like, what are these sounds and phrases? So we first grabbed them off of the Google Translate and grabbed the audio from there just as a neutral voice, particularly because at least in the beginning, I think it felt a bit odd for us just to record it over and over and over and over again. And we wanted something that felt a bit more as like a material. And I find grabbing audio just off of like AI generated sounds in some ways does relay that. I don't know if any of you will be able to hear this, but I am going to press the sounds here.
Chodź tu.
Are you able to hear that? Yeah?
I can hear it, yeah.
Yeah. And then
तुझी तबीयत बारी आहे का?
So these were the sounds that we first pulled. Sorry, Shalaka, were you saying something?
No.
Oh, no, sorry. Maybe I was just hearing something else. Okay, so we had these two sounds here, and one, so we kind of had two streams working within the first week. One was like ideating and really deciding on what we wanted to do together as a collaboration, which was just a lot of conversation. But then we also explored using different hardware to get these sounds to be activated, even with just a button press, which might seem really simple for a lot of people. But I will say sound is something I don't usually go near. My sound experience in relation to Arduino tends to be being really annoyed by like the beeps and the tones that I teach in class. And like my cats hate it too. So then they're annoyed. They don't want to like hang out with me while I'm like trying to test out stuff. But I don't craft sound. Like I am not a musician by any means. And so playing with sound and language and using it kind of more to create a soundscape is something that I think was also very daunting to me as well. Is there anything else that you wanted to add to this, Shalaka?
I think, I think one thing that also for like folks who aren't in the residency that might be useful to know is this is our first collaboration, and this residency also supported or facilitated us meeting in person for the first time. And so something that I found really interesting is like jumping into language, which is basically what we use to shape our context, and especially these sort of like lost family languages, like right away, I think was really soft and gentle, and but it was really funny to sort of like contrast that against like certain stories and then like have Google tell us or like sound out some of the phrases. There was, I think, like in the first week, so much of the tension of maybe not tension, but I'll stick with it for now. The tension of like we're really just getting to know each other for the first time, and we're just like diving into these like deep memories from like a very long time ago. So it was kind of fun to like navigate that through, or like how that mediated through technology as well, and kind of think about the ways that technology just like inevitably like interferes with some of these bits that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. So some of the initial drawings, though this is our first collaboration in person, Shalaka and I have had many other like proposals and soft projects where we've looked at making alternative maps and zines and just generally walking as a form of meditation. And so as we were starting to think about how do you get these sounds that are generated by Google that are very like foreign and not necessarily like they don't feel like any personality to them really. How do you have that on the body, and how do you make it activated as you're walking? And so we kept on landing on this idea of walking in a garment that activates as you walk. And so one of the first initial ideas was this idea of like these like pleated layers of fabric that as they connect as you walk, they would move, and it would trigger different switches to create sounds. We were looking at pockets, but we first kept on coming back to the shoulders. And I think particularly because of some of the inspiration that we had, both of us had seen Poor Things within the last 3 weeks. And I think that I would wear anything in that movie. I think that the costume design is fantastic, but just this idea of like volume and thinking about like, where do you feel it in your body? Is it in your joints? Is it in your shoulders? Do you feel like you're carrying something? Do you feel tense? Do you feel tight? So trying to exaggerate that. And then also one example that I had brought that from an exhibit that I saw a couple of years ago is Nick Cave, who creates these full body wearable costumes. Often many of them make sounds, and then he records them. And then you can also listen to the recordings while also viewing the costumes as well. But yeah, we kept on coming to this idea of like the shoulders and having something engage or make it more of a full body experience, so that it's not just about the feet, but it's about like, where do you feel everything in your body and how do you activate it with your full body, even if it's just walking. And then the other thing was both of us had kind of brought in one material that we wanted to try and incorporate into the work. Mine are these berry gummies that my grandma would say like, "Hochtu," and then you would come and then you would like you would get these gummy berries from a bag from her. When I reflect on it, I feel like I'm a puppy, like just coming to get a treat, like come over here. But it's a very fond memory that I have. And so you can get these at Bulk Barn, and this is me experimenting them with silver beads. And then Shalaka has this market bag, which I'll let you talk a bit more about.
Yeah, and I will say, like, I think Ellie has a really cute photo of both of us holding the berries during the open house, if I'm remembering correctly. It's, I think someone took a photo. Maybe it wasn't Ellie, maybe it was someone else. But yeah, I think during the process, I also really liked Olivia sort of like turning into her grandmother and like offering everyone berries, and I thought it was very sweet. Funnily enough, that your grandma had them in the bulk barn bags, because one of the materials that I sort of brought to the studio as well was a market bag. So in India, these are just sort of like at all the markets, which really are just like what in Canada would sort of translate to a farmer's market, but all markets are kind of like that and outdoors. And so these are sort of like woven plastic bags that are really colorful, usually striped. And you might see later on that they like fray pretty easily once you cut into them. But I had someone bring some back for me, and this is a material that I was like really thinking about a lot because one of the memories I also have with my grandparents is going to the market, and just sort of the sensory experience of like being on a motorcycle or being in like an auto rickshaw and like holding them all and like hobbling through, finding like good deals on tomatoes and market sort of habits. I think one idea like very early on was like even ahead of going into the residency was using this as like the textile and sort of like playing around with it, but just it was just so obvious as this collaboration unfolded that the final product really needed to be both of our stories and both of our reconnection journeys, and also reflect the conversations we were having in order to sort of arrive at that place.
Which brings us into week 2, which was much more focused on material play. So there's a whole other side note of me just like struggling with trying to get 10 microphones to work on a microcontroller that I'm not going to dive into because I think it makes me sad to think about it, that I did not get to get that to completion. And so whenever I feel really stuck, I just switch and I try and think about something that is going to be much more enjoyable, which for me is often materials. So one of the first things
Liv, sorry, just quickly on these themes here.
Yes.
Someone during one thing also during our residency open house was that we would tell people about the project and they would immediately start sharing their stories with language, which I don't think either of us were expecting for folks to get so personal so quickly. But one of the sort of conversations, and it was such an act of generosity on their behalf, but one of the conversations especially was around fluency and how one person had accused this person of like thinking in English or being like, do you only think in English now? And just sort of thinking about how that's sort of like, not a threat, just like sort of like, what's the word? Just like, it's kind of like derogatory, right? Like, oh, like you English thinker. And so we were thinking like, I think fluency and transparency and translucency and just like how porous language is something that we were thinking about as well in week 2 a little bit. And I think that was definitely inspired by that person during the open house. So if you're on this call, thank you. If you're not on this call, thank you. And I think that was something that really, really stuck with me because there was a point in my life where I was thinking in 5 languages and now primarily just thinking 2. And so I think it's really beautiful how that's sort of translated into sort of the rest of the process. The piece around like movement studies here is really, again, related to this like walking methods that we just inevitably sort of have returned to even during like our in-person intensive. We often went on walks and just like processed so much together and arrived back at the studio and we were like, okay, let's get into it. And so those are 2 that I specifically wanted to highlight on this before we keep going.
Yeah, no, for sure. So thinking about, there's kind of like, I'm gonna just quickly go between two slides back and forth. Thinking about like transparency and movement, there were kind of two materials that we kept on coming to in terms of like the transparency part. One was the bulk barn bags, which we ended up, I bought more berries and we took like 20 extra bags to try and make them into different, like, I don't know, volume in some way. Another was I was playing around on the knitting machine and I was using this like stretch plastic cord to try and create something that felt like really like stretchy that we could attach things to that could have a lot of movement on it. And so Shalak and I were playing with the materials quite a bit. And then also thinking about like the structure of it and how does that feel on the body? How does it relate to movement and how does it relate to our feelings towards like the phrases in our bodies. And we kept on sticking with shoulders at this point. This is a piece of like organza over in like the left here, or not organza. I actually can't remember what material this is. It's almost more of like
Oh, like gauze?
Gauze. Yeah, it's like a gauze that I just had in my studio. And so we just like tried folding it and like looping it and we're playing around with that. We found some like denim and canvas and we're trying to like paste it on and or like tack it on just using pins, just seeing like what was exciting overall. And we ended up liking the shape of the gauze and like the fluidity of it, but I think there still felt like there was like a bit of disconnect with it. We wanted to incorporate the materials that we had more so attached to the people like within our memories. And so like we tried to tack on like some of the berries, like we're like holding the market bag up, but the market bag is like very rigid. And then the bulk barn bags just like weren't really nice to work with. And so these were just kind of more so material explorations, but I don't think that it really made us feel as excited in terms of like having the body move and also thinking about putting stuff on the shoulders. And if you want someone to activate it as they walk, I think it's just too far away from like the feet in some ways is kind of where my brain kept on going to and where I was coming from in like the conversation. Like I just kept on thinking about like if like Shalaka always had the points like if this was in a gallery, like what would people think? Like what, like how connected is it to this? And I thought that people would just like if it was like looked like this on the left, like people would just like stroke it like on their shoulders instead of actually like wanting to walk. And we really just wanted to emphasize this act of walking. So we played around with a lot of the materials, and I incorporated like conductive thread and like metal beads into like the berries and some of the different materials we had to create different like switches that I was testing out as we went along with it. But it's pretty fun, honestly, just to like play around with materials.
Yeah, and I think in this week we were really like I think a lot of the experimentation was aesthetically driven. Like naturally we had an idea, but again, because we'd watched Poor Things and it was so on the mind, the costuming in the movie, we were sort of like, okay, like what if we lean into this and think about the interaction after? And as the weeks unfold, I think, yeah, the sort of life cycle of the full interaction of the wearable makes itself more apparent. Like versus here, we were sort of thinking about like weight and where we hold weight in our bodies, whether it's like a backpack or sort of just like stress and where it builds up. And I think as you'll see, we move, yes, from the aesthetic and sort of those thematics towards a more sort of life cycle of an interaction.
Which is
here.
Yeah. So thinking about like how do you like slow someone's gait, like do you want something to drag? Thinking about this idea of like how do you make something feel like make someone feel different like after they have taken off the wearable. And so the idea of weight, yeah, like holding weight in your shoulders, but what does it mean to hold weight like all over your body? I'm just going to hop into the prototype unless there's something else that we want to add into this, Shalaka.
No, it's great. Let's jump into it.
Okay. So we were thinking about it. And so also like Shalaka and I were like meeting online, like meeting in person, like throughout the week. And so Shalaka was like leaving and I was like, I have an idea. Like we need to like bring it back to the feet. And then we were brainstorming like how do you like try and keep something that's like wrapping around the body but wrapping around the feet, but is like inclusive for like all people to wear, in terms of like how does it, like, can it be like long, can it be short, how can it stretch? And so came to this idea of like heaviness, like what does it mean to like put something heavy on your body and for it to like have to be like pushed and moved as you're walking, and kind of create this idea of like instability. So this was the first prototype. And so rather than like in the previous ones where we're using like the materials as more adornment, in this one, it's like the materials are stuffed within the prototype. So this is just like a muslin. And so you can like see some of like the shades of like the darkness of like the berries coming through. But it was kind of like this idea of like intestines, like having this like feeling of like the language like within your body, and like carrying that on the outside. And so thinking about how to like bring the outside in. I also had in my studio just from so many like I just, you know, when you just like buy something for a different project and then it just like accumulates and somehow like all these disparate items like come together for like this. Anyways, this is like how I felt like it is when we were playing with the materials. And I was like, I had these pellets that like, like for weighted blankets that I've never used. And so in the feet, tried to make them lumpy at first, which wasn't working as well. But then I ended up making it bulbous. Let's see if this video is going to play. If it does, I'll be happy. Yeah, so the idea is that you would have those shoes. The shoes have switches in them, so as you step down, it closes a switch. Kind of like the intestines wrapped around. So this was just an initial prototype with just some switches just to see if it was like working in terms of that. But then as we started to think, like we didn't want it just to be like counting steps. We wanted it to be a bit more of a unique experience for each person wearing it. And so incorporating other types of e-textile switches and incorporating other materials into it. Which gets us to the second version of this prototype, which is including other materials such as doilies and pearls to add into the list, which I'm going to pass off to Shalaka to talk about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would say, like, again, not coming from like a maker background, like working with materials and yeah, one of the biggest lessons for me that I'm like so excited to have unlocked at this point, and I'm very grateful for to live for sort of like unlocking it for me in many ways is to just like playing with materials and letting them teach you. I think, yeah, there's many moments where I was like, what's the plan? Let's do the plan. And allowing, like, even moving from like the gauze to the muslin to sort of our final or like more final fabrics, the way that each material moved is so different. And so it was a real like stretch in my brain to sort of even think about those materials and frankly, you know, a little bit like emotionally difficult to think about this place that I haven't been back to in a really long time, right? And sort of like, yes, like rebuild that world in my mind, but also like pull certain materials and like it's difficult. And so I'm proud of myself, but also like very excited to have unlocked this new learning together, which sort of brings us to these pearls and these doilies. So our home in India is quite dusty, and that's because it's a dusty place, and that like in and out, indoor and outdoor are really interconnected. Dissimilar to the ways in Canada where things are really like sort of closed up because of the cold here. In India, because of the heat, things are really like airy and opened up, but that does also invite dust into the home. And so sort of the workaround, I suppose, that our family arrived to was putting down doilies, like pretty large ones that would sort of cover tables and to sort of prevent the dust from settling. Although it would do this quite beautiful thing when you did lift them to dust underneath, you'd have a little like doily sort of dust print in its absence. But that was a material that sort of like arose and I think like works really well for this idea of seeing through this like I keep thinking about translucency and fluency as like sort of interchangeable in terms of like material to thematic connection here. So I felt like that was, I was excited about bringing that in a little bit. And I was also thinking a lot about pearls, which aren't necessarily particularly popular in India, but are pretty special in our family. It's one of my nicknames in our family, but also just a gemstone that a lot of women in the family wear. And so I wanted to sort of honor these like lineages in a sense. And even just thinking about pearls they're like, I guess they're technically a gemstone, but they don't come off land; they come off water. And just thinking about sort of the formation of them is kind of interesting in the sort of storytelling here as well. But quite simply, they are just a material from my childhood. But there are sort of more extensive links to that are interesting as well. Yeah. Oh, here, why don't we, okay, since I talked for a little bit, I'll pass it off to you to talk about our funny little diagram.
Oh yeah. So in the diagram here, this is just us drawing out the version 2 of the intestines and being like, where do we want to try and like plant some connections for our particular like sensors on the outside. And then also thinking about this is really long, this is really heavy. How do we make all these connections and surface it? So trying to put in like thinking about like an invisible zipper. How are we going to make all the different connections here? I don't know. This is just the diagram for it and just trying to like plan it out and trying to color code it, but very loose, because I think something is like when we were making the other works, it's like it wasn't necessarily like highly designed. Like it was very like as we would like go, we would like make like a crunch and like one intestine, add some stuffing into it, etc.
One quick like Easter egg around the diagram. Liv and I both play Connections with our partners every day, the New York Times game, and so it has nothing to do with the residency, but it is a cute little Easter egg for like something we learned about each other. Is now sort of like in the documentation.
I like that. I didn't think about that. I like that a lot. So just for thinking about like the change of like the foot switch. So something in the first one was that I found that it wasn't getting, it just like wasn't, like rising, I guess. It was just like a bit too close to, like where it was connecting. So we added this like thick layer of stuffing around it so that it could bounce back. And then I tried to make it almost a bit more like a platform sandal in some ways. But this is just the look of it now. And then so there's some leather or some, I guess, like fake leather that we had gotten from the Social Body Lab, free like bin, or not the studio, not the Social Body Lab, but there was like the studio of fabric there. And so we grabbed some of that. And then there's just some of the silk that's wrapped around it there. And this worked a lot better than the previous one did. And then the assembly was quite fun. So pretty much we had about 2 meters of fabric and we just sliced and diced and just kind of like put them in order on the ground. We wanted to make it longer than the previous intestine. And then what we wanted to do is we wanted to have these materials kind of like sticking out. And so as I was like seaming the lines together, Shalaka was cutting up the market bag and like taking out the weave so that it could start to like splay out. And then it was and like cutting up doilies. And so we were just patching everything together as we were going. And we wanted to do that and then look at it after to see where would be good spots for sensors to go. And like, is there a particular doily that looks really nice that we can have some conductive thread going through? Is there part of the market bag that would hit another part of the market bag that we could make as a switch as well? So just trying to use some of the materials to try and lock in the sensors. And then for actually designing the sensors, we had kind of a conversation about whether or not we want stuff to be hyper visible or not. And so one technique that we're trying out, I use the present tense because we're still trying, is just some conductive fabric with a snap sewn into it so that and we marked it on the outside and the inside with tape of where the conductive fabric was so that we could then, after it's all sewn, then add the beads or whatever sensors we wanted on the outside so that we at least knew where it was and that there was a bit of like, I like calling it like a conductive fabric bus that you could make those connections towards. But this was just, a fun game of being like, where the sensor is going to go, how long of wires do we want to use for it? Also opted for wires just because it's going to be so long and heavy. I thought that there might be a bit too much like strain on any like soft connections. And if we had anything that was conductive fabric, then we'd have to insulate it on both sides because it's all going to be twisty and turny and they're going to overlap. So maybe wires wasn't the right solution, but it felt it was right at the time. And so this was us just marking it down here. And then we added an invisible zipper. We ended up soldering everything onto a breadboard and sewed the tube shut, and then added an invisible zipper like in this part of like the process here, just so that we could go in and service whatever we needed to do and add a battery, etc. But it's about 85% complete, I would say. We have some of the switches working. Sounds, still scared of them, honestly. I think that this is going to be we'll talk about next steps in a second, and then I'll pass it off to Shalaka just in case I forgot anything. But these are just some detailed shots of like where we're at. We still need to add the stuffing on the inside of it. It was just a bit scary to do that while things were still kind of like in motion, but I don't know. It's a very, I don't know. It's been a fun project in terms of material exploration and kind of like freeform pattern making. Is there anything else, Shalaka, regarding this?
I don't think so. I think those are the things that I'm sort of, I think what you've mentioned is really good process. Process notes. Yeah.
The sensors are also like there's one shoulder, 2 knees, 1 ankle, and then one that's like a bit above. So we wanted to try and make it to be a bit more freeform. We also need to make 1 more shoe. But that's also, my brain is struggling with like the shoe for some reason. So one of my prototype interactions for next steps is to research beanbag design for the slippers. Like, I think I just really need to look at Beanie Babies and see like how they're designed and like, how do you I don't know. That's just where I'm thinking, and also exploring more sounds in the work. And then I'll pass it off to you, Shalaka, for the following steps.
Did we mention that as you walk, you would be able to hear?
I don't think we did. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
My brain.
No. Like as you mentioned, I was like, oh, we talked. Yeah. I mean, so when we introduced the sort of like Google Translate sort of pronunciations, we've also, because sound is new for both of us, something that we sort of as sort of our ideal dream here is to build a sort of soundscape of the Google Translate, meshing together our conversations and sort of building this. And also just sort of other sounds from like a sort of library that we designed. So that includes the newspaper, which my grandpa would read. It would maybe include the Bulk Barn bags and like the motion of like opening it up to have a berry. And so like we want to activate the stories that are embedded through the material in the sort of in the wearable through a soundscape. And ideally, like as you step, the soundscape sort of like is distorted, but as you get to a certain number of steps, it maybe gets clearer. We're kind of playing around with that, but that is sort of the sound piece of why we're trying to like, I guess we're stuck on that, but we next slide potentially will sort of unlock some of that.
There's one tech thing that I think is really cool that I was going to add a photo of, but then I just thought the photo, I'm going to be honest, there's just like a lot of coffee rings on my desk and like my keyboard mat. And I just didn't want to publicize that. So I'm just going to show this instead. It's a Bluetooth receiver. So in the microcontroller we were using, the Teensy and the Teensy Audio Shield, there's an audio jack. And so we connected this into it so that you could use Bluetooth headphones so that you don't have to have it as a wired connection, which is really nice. And so that's another part of the design as well, which would be part of the steps is like designing like covers for the headphones to make it be a full experience. But okay, now
Part of the reason we want to use the Bluetooth is, say this work was staged on a mannequin as it is in the image here, and maybe we have a little pouch on the wall where people pick up headphones, wireless headphones, put them in. Because there's walking involved, we didn't want it to be a corded connection. So that's part of the incentive for using Bluetooth.
Yeah. Also, it's quite heavy. Like this, I would say okay, so right now it's not stuffed, but the one that is stuffed, like it's like just maybe like shy of like 20, 25-ish pounds, I want to say. Like it's quite heavy. Like those gummies are heavy, and also the pellets are heavy too. And so like it's like to think about like different like body like heights and sizes and just general like differences, like depending on like where the headphones would land, like to have that as well. Like I think it just takes a different it just like removes that chance of destroying
the
the
variable.
Yeah.
The variable.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, sorry. Can you go back one slide? The slide.
Okay.
The last thing I'll say here is one thing that I did with the prototype when I sort of was playing with it was I wrapped it around me like a big scarf, and it actually like weighed me down so dramatically that I had to like hug myself to sort of like stabilize myself, and that was a really sort of like surprising interaction that I don't think either of us were really like designing for. But I think something that's really nice because of this like intestine, like wearable slipper intestine, is that there is flexibility in terms of how it is worn. And I think as it sort of develops, especially with the soundscape, I'd love to sort of test it with other people and sort of see how they play with it and like redistribute the weight and think about that as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Now we can talk about next steps.
Yes. So yeah. Exploring sounds, researching beanbags, looking at like headphone design. We were very lucky to also get a micro grant from Pat the Dog Theater Connection, Kitchener-Waterloo, to continue prototyping the work. So we're going to do that. And then in May is the Strange Channels Festival, which Shalaka, I'm going to pass that off to you.
Yeah. It's a small festival put on by a intermedia arts center in Kitchener-Waterloo. And as we've sort of mentioned, walking, our prototype here deals with sort of like walking and mobile methods. We're doing a sort of extension of that within the festival and extending our thinking around that. But connecting it a little bit more to waterways. Specifically, there's a channelized part of a creek that runs near where the center is, I guess, like placed or housed or building. I don't know. And so during the festival, we'll invite participants to join us on a walk, record some sounds, and design a sort of soundscape using e-textiles and sort of engaging some of the lessons from what we've learned, but also sort of, building in a bit of a departure from this project specifically, but allowing for more collaborative connections to sort of form as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm excited. So yeah, we've learned a lot. It's been really fun. Thanks, Shalaka. Thanks, Bodies in Residence. It's been a great month.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much for the presentation. So actually we will leave the questions for you and Shalaka also in the end of the discussion along with other reflections and discussions and Q&As together. And from now we'll take a 10-minute break until 48, or let's make it 50 just for it easier to remember. And then we'll have the following 4 presenters. That will be Max, Lee, Blaine, and Michelle. All right.
Great. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you at 7:50.
Thank you.
Hello.
It's only us.
Julian, are we live?
Yes.
Oh, welcome back. I'm such a professional. Hey, it's Kate. I'm taking over from Ellie with a little bit of hosting. So welcome back to the second half of our Bodies in Residency resident presentations, project presentations. So next we're going to hand it over to Max, who is going to share the updates on this awesome project. So Max, I leave it to you if you're all good.
I like that a spooky sound appeared when Michelle popped in from it's just thematic. It's just
Yeah.
this ramp up for the spooky sound chat.
Right. Cool.
Yeah, I am Max. I make games and stuff that kind of looks like games. I started this with like, oh, I'm gonna just be really selfish and like dig into what is bringing me joy at the moment, which is modular synthesis. And I was like, I'm gonna figure out a way to like repurpose and like reuse stuff that is meant for one thing in a different context. Namely, can I make a game out of this weird synthesizer? Going into it was very much so like, oh, I don't actually know if I know how to use this, so I don't know how this is going to go. Like, I have some ideas about what the game could be, but one of the things that I'm really interested in is like using theremin inputs, and I have no idea what kind of game that could possibly involve. But I do know that I can probably get a theremin-based machine to spit out words via sample chopping. I was like, I think I can do that. And so I'm going to spend the rest of my time figuring out how that technology works and then maybe writing a game around it. And surprising me, I think more than anybody, the technology was really easy, which kind of threw me for a loop. I tend to be I tend to be quite used to fighting with technology, and that being like a lot of where I spend my time in. And in that process of fighting with technology, end up like finding where I want to go with it. And so I actually was quite thrown when like at the end of week 1, I was like, oh, it's doing the thing I want it to do. That's weird. I guess I have to do that other part that I thought was going to be the easy part. And a little bit had my expectations inverted. And so this, I also like, it's this machine. It lives here. It's cool. It does stuff. It does stuff in a way that I wanted it to do very quickly. And so the basic idea, and we had, some folks fiddling with it, but the basic idea is that you move your hands in response to these two little theremin antennas and try and like find sound that is audible. And in trialing it and having people come in and fiddle with it, it was very affirming in that a lot of people were like, yes, I totally want to touch that weird object. It is very appealing. I would like to interact with it. And then it was very much so like, oh, but it's weird and it does weird stuff. And if I'm not here to explain what it does or how to use it, it doesn't really get interacted with in any way that is productive to what it wants to the game. And I don't mean like productive. I mean, it's like people can just fiddle with it and that's fun, but that's not really where I wanted to end up. And so a lot of my time ended up being spent in how do I explain and encapsulate and design this game that is self-contained so that it doesn't require me to guide people through it, which was hard for me, at least. Part of the reason that this felt difficult is that it involves a lot of writing, which is not my strongest suit. Again, much more comfortable fighting with technology than I am trying to write narrative things. And I knew that I wanted it to that I was going to have to like play on the language of tuning and play with the idea of it being kind of like a haunted radio, or there being some kind of message that is coming through, and that's kind of like the nature of it itself already gives that. And so I felt that if I was going to be kind of grabbing that in any good way, it had to be in relation to what the box was already communicating, which is, this feels kind of like I'm tuning something because there's antennas, and it feels like I'm trying to decipher a message. And so how do I play into deciphering a message that I'm tuning with my hands? And I got quite stuck for a little bit in there, in what I could do with that. And I started thinking a little bit in conversations that I was having in the studio about Sleep No More, and just the idea of being able to, Sleep No More being an immersive theater experience, and the idea of being able to like kind of root through things and discover meanings and kind of like try and determine what's happening in a space, and that just being all because all of the objects that you're interacting with are intentionally placed and in the world, like you're in a whole created, you're in the theater, whatever, you're in a whole created scene. And thinking about that, and then thinking also about some like video game cheats of like, what if I just left a note around? Which I realize is like a totally legitimate video game rule, or tool, but it feels a little bit like a video game cheat. And those two things kind of led me to, oh, I kind of want to make a technical manual, and I don't know how to incorporate the fiction into a technical manual, or how to ask the player to get into a character in the technical manual. And I was like, I can do that by just tucking a note into it saying like, sorry, I'm not there. Enjoy your first day. I found this book for you, which feels a little bit like a cheat, but I think it only feels like a cheat because it's kind of easy. And probably I just need to like nip the part of me that thinks that's not okay in the butt. And the second that I was like, oh, I can use this entry point of just like writing to somebody as if we are friends, as if they are already whoever I need them to be in the game, or as if they are already this character, kind of does that invite a lot. It sets up, I can set up whatever world that I want to build. I can do all of that in that little note. And then I also, for my emotions, don't have to worry about it being well written because it can just be written like a note. And therefore it can be really conversational. And so the second that I was like, okay, as long as that solves a huge part of my game design problem, which is where I ended up spending a lot more of this last month than I thought I would actually be spending. And then it was like, now I have to write a technical manual. And that means I'm going to make up a bunch of technology. Conveniently, I literally just took language from this old radar manual that I found. I found I don't know if this is just like an extremely nerdy thing, but like I found the form of this very compelling, just like the structured language of like, here's your definition, here's your principle, or whatever. This format and this layout I found really compelling. And so I just nabbed it, took out, a bunch of the like military stuff, and made a bunch of fake technology stuff. Wrote a bunch of, sure, this is how this technology works. It's for sure not a real thing. But did a lot of the world building in there as well, as far as you are communicating with something and leaving that something totally unknown, but kind of framing it as it being like a little bit of future sight, a little bit of like foretelling, like you're getting this message that you're kind of deciphering into maybe is going to be a future event, which in my mind needed imagery. And so I drew a bunch of really cute little icons. I wanted to figure out one of the really big like game design moments in this was because I didn't think about how the game was going to work. And I only thought about what is compelling about this technology, and what is this technology giving me? And this technology is giving me words, and words are my mechanic. Words are my tool. Words are the things that the players are going to be interacting with the most. So like, yes, we have this theremin, we have these hand motions. That's like the physical thing that's happening. There's a little bit of a mechanic in there, but really when it comes to it, what the player is getting given to interact with is the words. And so how do I design a game that uses words in this kind of really modular divinatory way? And I thought it would be kind of fun to give words like tags or themes. And so the general idea where it sits now, not this one icon of me showing you how to use the thing is not related to what I'm currently saying, but the way that it works now is that you decipher your words, you record your words, you pair them up if you end up getting a bunch so that you only have a certain amount, and then you tag those words with themes and feelings. So this is, and the way that you tag them is to draw the symbols that I've created, that I've put in the book, as kind of just as like little tags, because I find in the realm of solo role-playing games, in the realm of, I'm going to use solo role-playing games for this one part more moment before all my illusions are shattered. Doodling is nice, like drawing is nice, giving somebody the act of like, oh, I'm going to interact with this, and then I'm going to, as opposed to just like writing and journaling, which is where I thought I'd sit. I wanted to give, I really liked the idea of giving some kind of drawing activity to it, which also left it more abstract and more amorphous and unidentified, and more just like, what are you feeling when you hear the word danger? What kind of danger do you think that's going to be? This is a fake filled out version of the form that I created, and what was interesting in this process a little bit once I got to this point was now I have to go back and think about what the words are that are going to be loaded into the machine, and making sure that those words are evocative. So originally I had phrases in there, and phrases tell too much. People were like, you already get the whole feeling. There's not a lot of interpretation with the phrasings that were in there. And so I wanted to go back and edit it into just words. And then I had to pick words that were evocative and that could hold a lot of that power and hold a lot of inspiration for people to interact with. And that was really interesting, and trying to go through found words and not wanting to record my own voice, because I don't want to record my own voice. But I think probably what was interesting in that moment for me was that I realized that I could make a wholly different game just by changing whatever the audio samples were, which is like a thing that I knew the entire time, but it became very concrete in that moment of, if depending on what those words are, that's like a lot of the tone building of the game. And so I got here and was like, oh, I need to go back. I need to go back a few steps and change the audio inputs. Yeah. And so I did that, and then I compiled everything into a little zine. And then I fought with a printer for an hour and a half to print it. And you can't see it because it's very light, but it exists. And it has a page and a half of rules, and then it has the final set of marks that you are asked to use, and then the back is the sheet that you fill out, the record that you make of your experience with this strange machine. The zine happened Wednesday, so yesterday. And I conveniently actually managed to get somebody over today to give it a good old play test. And so I don't know if the audio is going to work, but I am going to play it so you can actually like hear the audio that's coming out of the machine in response to folks moving around. Let's see. one of the things that was really apparent when people came in to play it at in week 1 was that there is an inclination to move really quickly and move really fast and like hopefully find, and the goal was really more to search as opposed to like modulate things. And I think that one of the things that the zine kind of helped do was to oh, it's not live sound. It's recorded sound. I don't know why it's so quiet. Is that better? Well, if it didn't work, I'll point it on the internet. But it's effectively doing the thing that I wanted it to do, which is fun, and that's cool, and I like that a lot. And it got like a better feedback. Like this friend of mine was like, "Oh yeah, no, that's kind of cool. It does the things it does, like some of the stuff you've been talking about. It's actually like satisfying to interact with. It fights back in some ways that is interesting. One of the like affordances of the modular synth is that I can patch it in a different way so that it is constantly like it's not only controlled by the player's body, it also has kind of its own behaviors into it. And so you're kind of always getting this push and pull, which makes it have character, which is really nice. And have some cool like atmospheric sounds and stuff to it. And a thing that I think has been the biggest revelation for me in this process is that it is for sure. Oh no, why are we editing? No. It's for sure a LARP. And I have gone on record with talking about hating LARPs a lot. And so I am having this is based on some conversations again that we're having in the studio. It for sure is a LARP, and I have a hard time with LARPs, but I guess I'm a person who I'm designing them, which is very interesting for me because I think of like experiences like Sleep No More and immersive theater is really inspiring, and they're soft LARPs, so it's a thing that I just need to get over. But it has really, the game design was kind of difficult and the technology was really easy, and I think the things that I am kind of leaving with are some goals to continue the project for sure, but also a lot of like conceptual questions around where those lines are between like role-playing games and LARPs and immersive games and augmented reality and all of those things, and like, do those boundaries matter in any meaningful way, or is that a totally useless categorization of things? And what are the ways in which I want to lean in or lean out of that? One of the things that I realized kind of halfway through was that I was sad that I didn't think a lot of people get to play it. So one of my goals moving forward is to definitely install it somewhere, which I think would necessitate changing it a little bit, but I think would actually help with a lot of those like world building and buy-in concerns that I feel like I was having for a lot of the month. But even in an install context, it like tickles the part of me that really likes the immersiveness of it, and the role-playing and LARPy bits of it, but it becomes, this is maybe, I don't know, this is a weird, as a game designer, I am very attached to people playing the things that I make. And in that context, it still becomes quite inaccessible. And so because I've been watching everybody have like a lot of really interesting successes with Arduino-based stuff recently, I've been like, I should make a tiny little Arduino version of it. So my moving forward is to emotionally convince myself that I don't have a problem with being a person who is making a LARP, and also maybe to transform it into a tiny little box version that I could send to people, so that they could play it in a variety of different contexts. Yeah. Never not using this GIF.
Thank you so much, Max. That was really awesome to see how much progress you've made and that you've turned out these zines. lots more to talk about there, but at this point, I'll invite Lee Wilkins to come share their work. Hi, Lee. Nice to see you.
Hello. Yeah, thank you so much. I'm really excited to share what I've been working on. I don't have a presentation. I'm just
All
gonna
good.
talk to you guys.
We love talking. That's why we're here.
Excellent. Okay, cool. So first of all, I had such a great experience with this residency. It was such a good opportunity to carve out space to do something that's like slightly outside of my practice. In a lot of ways, you know, it's aligned to like I'm doing physical computing, doing electronics, but like moving into this whole new space that encompasses a part of my identity that I've not really explored very much is a whole thing, which I'm excited to share with you folks. So basically, I'm gonna have this presentation in two parts. The first part is going to be kind of like a big conceptual hurdle that I had to get over in doing this project. And I'm not even 100% sure if I'm over it, but I had to confront, let's say, to do this project. And then the second part is a little tech demo, and I'll show you what I've made and look at fun tactile things. So just to recap a little bit some of the things that I have been thinking about, this project is situated in a larger body of work that I'm starting to produce, which I'm calling the maintenance of vision. So it's basically a series of works that try to make evident all of the infrastructure that exists in our daily lives that like upholds vision as a primary sense. So part of this is it's been becoming increasingly clear to me that it is almost invisible how like obvious it is that vision is the primary sense, and it's something that I have had many discussions with people about, and I feel like people are dependent in a way where they don't even necessarily realize that a lot of technology that exists is almost an accommodation for this dependence. And I'm not even necessarily saying this is good or this is bad. I just think it's important that we are understanding the limitations we're putting on ourselves and the assumptions we're making about each other, and even the assumptions that we're making about ourselves. So I also, you know, have been thinking about the role. It's something that I'll come back to several times, is that any person who occupies a marginalized identity of any kind or an intersectional identity of any kind knows that there's always this balance of like, how do you talk about this stuff and incorporate it in your practice without necessarily making it, of course, it's pivotal to your practice. Your practice can't exist the way it does without your identity being a part of it. But does it have to be kind of the first thing, or should it or shouldn't it? And it's a whole thing to deconstruct. So I am sort of coming into my identity as a disabled artist, even though I have been disabled my entire life, and just trying to figure out how to talk about it. So specifically in the context of VR, it's been interesting to me to watch technology shift away from this tactile focus. You know, I think everyone everyone anywhere can experience and enjoy a clicky button. I feel like we all love a good tactile switch and clicky button, but if we look at our technology, we're getting further and further away from that with every single step. So, you know, all of our phones, our laptops, tablets, they're all these like sleek surfaces that really cater very specifically to vision and create a dependence on vision. And with every step we take in that direction, we're kind of like making choices about who's included and excluded, who's considered in the future, and who's not really considered in the future. So my goal is really to prompt people to understand that this is a choice that we're making. VR in specific, I think, is an interesting place to explore that topic because it assumes that that vision is the primary way immersive experiences are created, with audio being kind of like a secondary sense. And one of the biggest ways that this happens specifically in VR is through controllers that are on your hands. So the interesting thing I find about these controllers are that they not only occupy your hands, and for me, my hands are one of the primary ways I explore the world, but they also don't necessarily provide any meaningful feedback. They are kind of a way to to navigate some aspects of the world or to engage with the world, but they're not necessarily a way to like sense or understand that. So what I wanted to do with this residency was like expand on ways that are non-visually focused that can kind of regain this sense of immersion that that many people who don't rely on sight as a primary sense are able to get from their tactile world. So there's actually a lot of different infrastructures that go into the idea of accommodating vision. This can be everything from the idea of producing dyes and producing colors and different screens and resolutions, and what are the infrastructures that go into that. But it can also be like a social thing that we are learning to like discuss and uncover. So the biggest thing, and I had a lot of discussions about this in the residency, was how to approach this topic and to speak about this project without it kind of reducing itself down to kind of the first thing that people think of when they think of an accommodation or accessibility, which often puts things as like, how can we take this existing technology and make it accessible? Or like, what does it mean for an able-bodied person to look at a disabled person and think, how can we include you in the space, versus designing primarily for these people in the first place? So the interesting thing that happened for me in this residency was going from this space where I was discussing these topics in private with people who I trusted, people who are very familiar with me and the way I navigate the world and my opinions about that, going from that to a scenario where I had to all of a sudden be confronted with people's first thoughts when they hear this. And their first thought can be a variety of different things. Sometimes it makes people uncomfortable, which is something I'm realizing is one of the reasons why I stopped talking about this stuff in the first place. Makes people uncomfortable, or they say kind of like the first thing that relates to them in this space. And I think this is also something that a lot of people in activist arts can, or people who again occupy a marginalized identity, can really identify with, right? So you are, if I'm all of a sudden talking about my disability, I'm kind of confronted with, oh, like my neighbor had a cane. So I'm like, okay, well, that's cool, but it doesn't really have anything to do with anything that I'm talking about. And you have to navigate the space of bringing people up to speed. So I had a lot of really great discussions with people in the residency about how to navigate this. And some of this came down to different like types of vocabulary. Some of this came down, oh my God, my headphones are about to die. Great. So how to navigate the space and how to also like bring people along for the discussion with me. Oh, I'm just gonna get ahead of my headphones dying and just take them off. And hopefully you guys can still hear me.
Okay, I'm gonna hope you guys can still hear me.
All good. Everyone can hear you.
Great. Okay, cool. So where was I? So I really wanted to avoid talking about myself in these scenarios. I really wanted to avoid positioning this as an art about me, because actually I would say it's an art about able people and about their own perspective, and not necessarily an art about disabled people or about the disabled experience, but to make people who are sighted become aware of the thing that they're engaging with themselves. And I had a lot of good discussions about this. One was with a friend, Ashley Jane Lewis, who is not a resident, but is a Toronto-based artist who also does a lot of like identity-based activism work. And she gave me some really great tips. And some of those tips were to be very direct about the subject, and to just offer people something that they could go and they could read to get them up to speed, but also kind of make it clear that this not always necessarily a space to occupy people's entry points into the subject. And I think it's really interesting in disabled communities because there's two main ways of thinking. There's the one way of thinking that's like, well, you're like this and you should be an ambassador to educate people. And the other way of thinking is that you don't owe anyone anything and you don't owe anyone any explanation. And I rapidly oscillate between the two, and I think the reality is kind of somewhere in the middle. And I think
it's not something that is unique to specifically my experience, but I think it's anyone who occupies any of these marginalized identities can identify with. So I had some really, really interesting discussions about that. In the end, I really thought an interesting way to do this would be to put a sighted and not sighted person kind of on this equal footing and allowing them to explore one single space through a variety of ways. So having one person specifically in a sighted role, one person specifically in a not sighted role, but requiring the two of them to engage equally in order to navigate the space. So I worked with a sighted collaborator, Kyle Chisholm, and we made, we're in the process of creating this space that allows both of these abilities to navigate it neutrally. So the form that takes, I really wanted to kind of avoid a screen, but I felt like in a lot of ways, the idea of having a screen that doesn't tell you all the information, might be a way. Like I said, it's not necessarily an art about me and my disability. It's an art about how people can understand the world in a multitude of ways. So our project basically involves a sighted person who's looking through a screen, and they're looking through a screen using a type of technology called Fish Tank VR. So depending how you look through the flat screen, if you look at it from one perspective or another perspective, you can see a different part of the room. And then the not sighted person is wearing haptic peripherals. So they're also holding the screen. So basically, depending on how the sighted person is looking through the screen and depending on how they're physically navigating this virtual space, they're getting different types of haptic information. So what this looks like in practice is that maybe the sighted person sees like two cubes, and the two cubes are vibrating differently using haptic motors. Or they, they can't see something, but the person, the not sighted person is able to feel something. But then there's certain pieces of information that the sighted person has that maybe the not sighted person doesn't have. So they're trying to collaborate together. One of the big things that we ran into is that we didn't want to make a tech demo. And when I had originally thought of this, I thought about making something where you could experience a tactile space fully without, just basically like a tech demo of experiencing a tactile space. So you'd be able to put your hand side to side, up and down, and be able to feel yourself in a room. So that to me felt a little too contextless, and creating this sort of interaction between a sighted and not sighted person allows both people to kind of explore a little bit more physically. But one thing we ran into is that I am not a game designer. Actually don't know that much about designing games, and I had a few good discussions. And if anyone listening has any idea for any disabled game designers who would like to create actual content for this, I'm imagining maybe it's some kind of information gathering game. I don't know. I'm also like kind of unsure about the role of aesthetics in the game. Despite being a visually impaired person, I still enjoy aesthetics, and I love colors, and I would love to see what someone could imagine. So we're still looking for another person who wants to design that kind of experience. Another thing that was really important to me is this sort of division of the way the game is like physically produced. So during the residency, I was really focused on the idea of the haptic side, and really just kind of putting my energy there, and not actually focusing too much on what the screen side would be like. And that's kind of like a conceptual division. As well, one thing that was really important to me is that someone who's not sighted is able to physically set this up. Someone who's not sighted is able to code it, engage with it, and like fully play and experience the game without needing the assistance of someone else. And again, I'm not thinking of that in terms of an accommodation. I just think that should just be a way that things sometimes are. Not even a way that things always are, but just the way that sometimes things are that way. So yeah, that's some of the conceptual framework that that we're working with. and really like exploring that space. Another thing that was kind of really important to me was reimagining electronic enclosures. So this is like more related to like the materiality part of my practice. So, you know, a lot of my work kind of comes back to this idea of squishy futures, which I talked about at the beginning of the opening residency talk. But it's kind of the idea that like the future is both malleable in like a social way, like we get to dictate and understand, and it's through learning about our technology and learning about the biases that are within it that we can change the way technology is emerging and developing, but also a way to think about how the materiality of the future can exist in ways that are not necessarily these rigid embodiments of technology that we're always thinking about. We can explore in different kinds of materials. So that's what I was really hoping to do, especially when we talk about things like Raspberry Pis and Arduino and PCBs. They're like very, very rigid technologies. And almost every way of attaching them to the body in the end comes down to these like types of like physically very rigid technology that you're trying to squish onto your very organically shaped human body. So I explored a couple of different plastic methods, and I ended up creating these peripherals that are made out of silicone. So this is one example. We'll look at all of the others in a minute. So this is a haptic motor driver. So basically what this does is it allows me to send use a very small amount of code to send more complex types of haptic motor signals. So by doing this, I'm able to really have very fine control about what kind of information the wearer is able to receive. And then inside here, there's a couple of different things. There's these little dips that house LEDs, and then there's a hole that goes through the back that is able to hold the haptic motor itself. So these are attached. I tried a couple of different methods. I think what is probably working best is eyelash glue, which was a suggestion from a fellow resident. So they go on different parts of your body, and they are able to send different signals. So right now I have 3, and they go on your wrists and behind your ear right here. And we'll have a look at those. So here's my sample table. Here are the 3 different haptic drivers that are hooked up. And you can see in the back here, there's this motor that comes out of the hole in the back. And as this is glued to your skin, because the silicone also is like creates a little bit of suction, it like really like holds onto your skin, and you're able to like feel, even though it's a very tiny motor, you can still feel it quite well depending where it is on your body. And then each of these also is connected using I2C just to the microcontroller that is over here. I did include these LEDs. They are moving at the same, or they're lighting up at the same frequency as the motor, and they're able to shine right through because this silicone doesn't have any, it has like no dye or no coloring in it. So these are the 3 drivers right here. I created these just through using like this process of using a wax-based molding clay. So this was my first time using a lot of these materials. So it was a really big learning process for me. So I created this mold, and I don't know where this is. Yeah. I basically used the electronics to fit them inside here. And then I created this with a monster clay. And then I used that clay to make this mold. And then I used that mold to make each of these individual casts. So I had varying degrees of success. So this was the first one I made. I spent the most time on it. It came out amazing, exactly as imagined. This mold is able to really like hold this piece quite well. One thing that I did notice that happened is as I started to add a few more pieces of electronics, I deliberately chose the softest silicone, and the more I added, the more I could like really feel how the electronics changed the consistency of the material. This is another one I made that was originally to hold the microcontroller. And then the first week that we got to the residency, we were given these great little Adafruit controllers, and I decided that this was the thing I wanted to use instead. So this quickly became useless. But the other thing as well was I made a few different changes to the technology, so this doesn't really fit what I had imagined anymore. This was the peripheral to kind of link the sighted and not sighted person. So again, something that was really like important to me was creating these forms that like felt very organic, these forms that didn't feel necessarily like technology, but also are responding to this idea of like a prosthetic. So something that feels like an extension of you in the way that technology often can. So this is like the screen part of the peripheral, and it's held in with this prosthetic that you kind of slide your hand into. The biggest problem with this was that, again, using the softest silicone so that it would just like feel a bit more organic, and so that I could like use it to kind of hold the electronics inside. This Raspberry Pi is actually just a bit too heavy for it. Also, just to thank everyone everyone who helped me dig it out of this huge mold, which was also a really great learning process. But it did eventually come out of this mold for those who saw it in process. So yeah, that's basically where it's at. I have experimented on one side creating these, experimenting with putting the different peripherals on different parts of your body and seeing what kinds of feedback that you can get. And I found a lot of things were very surprising, especially with the small motors and with kind of like trying to accommodate being able to be mobile. That was something that was really like important to me, that the wearer is able to like explore and engage with their environment in different ways. So nothing could be on your fingertips. I didn't want anything like too far on your neck. I didn't want anything too close to any joints. But sometimes those are actually the most sensitive parts of your body. So I settled on having things a bit further up your arms, and like a bit more behind your head, so you can kind of like feel it a little bit more like those bone conducting headphones. And on the software visual side, it's getting it's playable, but we don't have currently any content. So if and so the next steps are going to be to merge these two parts together, and also to try to find somebody to work with who is able to help us with some game design elements. So yeah, that's it.
Oh my gosh, thank you, Lee. That was an amazing presentation. It's so great to connect with your thoughts and your framing of your thoughts about this work, and then also to get a live demo. So, so yeah, great. Well, thanks, and we'll invite Lynn now for the next presentation, and we'll be circling back with everyone towards the end. So, Lynn, welcome. Nice to see you, and passing it on to you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me again. I've really enjoyed this residency, and it's been great to see what everyone has been working on and their projects so far. So let me just share my screen. All right. Okay, so I just wanted to start with a brief introduction for those of you who may not know me or did not attend the previous artist talks at the beginning of the month. I'm an interdisciplinary artist based in Detroit. I work with textiles, electronics, and video. I love to embroider and quilt as much as I love to solder. And I like to create mainly interactive installations that incorporate touch sensors, often capacitive touch sensors, sometimes pressure sensors. I love to work with light to kind of create new environments for people to experience. My work is very experiential and immersive. So that's the goal that I have when I create art. This residency was very challenging for me because I'm making a wearable. I'm not using video or light or the things that I'm normally engaging with in terms of e-textiles. I think the most I've done with wearables is putting LEDs and sequencing them. So this is definitely beyond my comfort zone. So a bit about my project concept. On the left is a wearable that I had made at ITP Camp last year. And it was kind of a prototype of a precursor to this project, so to speak. So I really wanted to make a wearable MIDI controller. So something that, for those of you who work with music, I use a lot of MIDI to sequence synthesizers, drum machines, you know, send out, have a master clock for all of my instruments. MIDI controllers are a bit limited. There's pretty much 3 things that usually you find. Knobs, so there's this motion, sliders, or a button or pad. And occasionally you'll get something that's pressure sensitive. But I feel like these 3 motions are somewhat limited. And I've actually thought a lot in this process about why MIDI controllers are designed that way. Obviously, you have a pot where you can, with one easy motion of your hand, you can do a full sweep. So that's beneficial, but I feel like there are other ways to think about controlling instruments, controlling sound with your body. So the first project that I had, I think I was thinking too much of this mindset of what MIDI controllers I'm used to. So you can see there's actually capacitive touch sensors made with conductive fabric that I aligned in a way that almost looks like drum pad. So I was playing drums on it. This was connected to a circuit playground. It was interesting, but as I started to play it on my arm, just having that squishy feel of your skin push back was not the same feel as touching a hard controller where you get a little bit more resistance. So already functionally, it was not doing it for me. And I started to experiment with different ways of using it, like kind of sliding my other arm across it to create different drum patterns. So I started thinking along these lines of, like, you know, instead of creating a wearable MIDI controller that's reminiscent of something that already exists in a hard format, using the body itself and the movement of the body to control sound. So then I thought of the theremin, which I've always been very intrigued by since I was a child. I was a band nerd, so my band director brought one in one day for us to play around, and I was very just amazed by the fact that you can make music through just moving your hands through the air. And this was something really novel to me because, as someone who has studied instruments, I've played piano for many years, different instruments. Instruments take many years to practice, to learn, to have that muscle memory ingrained in your mind so that you can just go and play. But not everybody has the time for that, you know. Not everyone has 1,000 hours to become a master at a particular instrument. So the idea of a theremin where you could just play around with it, and for those of you who don't know, theremin has 2 antennas that create electromagnetic fields. So you're interacting with each of these antennas, one which controls the volume, the other which controls pitch. And it also, the action of it reminded me of someone conducting. So I was very intrigued by this instrument and thought, what if I could create an instrument that lived on the body, but operated in a similar way as a theremin and could be used for people who don't have 1,000 hours to put into learning how to play an instrument, don't have that time or desire, but want to be able to use their body, use controllers to create music very easily. So this is really I have it in mind for beginners, people who don't have any experience with making music. So that's kind of the group I had in mind for this project. And then the photo on the right is an artist named Viola Yip, who actually just happened to perform in Detroit during this residency. I think it was last week that I went to her performance. And she is an artist from Berlin, also performing with a wearable instrument. In this case, a dress made out of PVC fabric with uninsulated like speaker cable lines sewn into it. And then she also had 2 EMF recorders in either hand. The sound which went through a number of pedals, some were distortion, different effects. And then as she moved around with her dress, she would create feedback and interference, and there'd be this crazy noise experience. But I was really infatuated by her performance and this creation that she made. I actually have a video here if I can play it. So let me share a different screen here. Okay, hopefully the video or the sound will play here as well. But I'll just play a short clip so you can see it, because the sound is mostly just noise, unstructured noise. But the visual was really inspirational for me for this project. So let me just turn down the sound. Okay. So I just wanted to share a clip of that so you get an idea. Let me go back to my presentation. So I was able to really talk with her in depth about her wearable instrument that she made and how she performed. And you could see in the video how physical the performance was. And she was just like rolling around on the ground. And part of that was, squeezing and pushing and pulling and banging. And it was totally different than what I'm trying to do. But we had talked a bit about making wearable instruments. And she had said something that I had really been thinking a lot about during this project, and trying to make a MIDI controller on the body versus something that is hard and standalone. And she mentioned that, previously she had made a bunch of different musical instruments and DIY instruments, all different kinds. And prior to making this wearable instrument, she had only really thought of machines as machines and humans as humans, and making a machine for the human interacting with the machine. And I feel like that's how most people make instruments. They think, how is the human being going to interact with this object? But as she was making this wearable instrument, she started to understand that actually those lines can be blurred, and the line between human and machine can dissolve in a way. So that's something that I really, as she said that, I really agreed with that idea. I wanted to see how I could incorporate that into my project, and think about the body as an instrument in itself, not interacting with something else in order to create sound. The other thing I really got from this conversation with her about wearable instruments was I mentioned my own project working with proximity sensors to trigger different parameters within a virtual instrument. And she immediately said, I could never do that. I need to feel something. I need to squeeze something. I need to hit something. So even just the idea of like how she wants to use her body is totally different than how I want to use my body. This instrument would not be for her, as her instrument might not be necessarily something I would want to engage with. So thinking of in those terms of like everybody's body is different. And so if the instrument is a body, then every instrument is kind of singularly for that body. So this instrument is specifically for my own. So that's a little bit about the actual concept. So initially for the first week in person at OCAD, I did a lot of experimentation because there were a lot of sensors that I had never really used much before. One was a stretch sensor. So that was the first idea that I had. I wanted to use the joints, use the elbows, knees, different parts of your body that could move like this to kind of create the instrument and control sound. It didn't work as well as I would want. I didn't really get the range of values or consistency that I wanted. And also the rubber cord broke a couple times, so it was not as sturdy, I think, for the body. And then also I started thinking about, okay, so these are different sensors I want to try that go on the body. But how does it feel as I'm using it? And then two, how does it look? So this sort of action, I felt like I was like in the gym doing reps or maybe an Oompa Loompa dance. It was not visually, when I did it in the mirror and kind of looked at myself doing these movements, it was not appealing to me. It didn't feel comfortable. It didn't feel like this was an instrument for my body. And then Kate was kind enough to let me try out some of the EMG sensors from the Social Body Lab. So I had experimented with that a bit. Again, it was like a lot of flexing. EMG sensors pick up on your muscle activity. So as you are, flexing, it creates a stream of data. That was also not something that was for me. I got tired after a while just flexing that much. So just trying these out different sensors that would work for my body and how I like to move was a really strong period of experimentation for, I would say, the first week and a half. Thank you to Olivia for giving me the idea to use accelerometers, because that's what I ended up using and what felt actually the closest to the movement of using a theremin with your hands. I originally tried doing it with the Circuit Playground because I have a few of them lying around, and tried out the Circuit Playground Bluefruit because it has Bluetooth capability. And I tried for a few days to kind of get it to connect wirelessly to my computer so I could send data from it, but I couldn't quite get it to connect. I found some documentation that talked about updating your Python 3 on your computer and using Python to connect the Bluetooth wirelessly, but it just didn't work. It just kept quitting on me. So I moved on to just the ESP32 because you can use OSC to send data wirelessly. So that was quite straightforward. The documentation was very easy, and Jeske actually sent me some code that she had used before, so that it was very straightforward. So I moved on to accelerometers and proximity sensors, which I'd already planned on using, but in trying to incorporate it with accelerometers was a bit of a challenge. The next part of my process was definitely the coding part. So the Arduino code was pretty straightforward. And then really just getting the data into MaxMSP, which is what I'm using. MaxMSP is a visual programming language specifically for digital sound processing. So it's I can create instruments here. The thing that I also like about MaxMSP is that it incorporates seamlessly into Ableton, which is a DAW that I run my output out of. So I'll show you a little bit more about this patch, how it works in depth in a little bit when I do the demonstration part. But I spent a lot of time building this instrument in MaxMSP. And getting the sensor data into it was quite easy. It was just one object, UDP receive, and then putting the remote port in there, number in there. And then in came the stream of data, so which I could send to many different areas of this instrument. So the last week, I really just, after getting my sensors working, getting the coding right, getting the instrument in MaxMSP how I wanted, it was time to actually put it on the body itself. And so I had a few different designs. I ended up having to go with the second one that I started because one of the proximity sensors, it would not communicate over direct into the I2C. There's like a port here on the microcontroller that you can just plug right into. It wouldn't communicate. I had to just basically solder it direct to the pins. So that kind of limited the actual design of it, but it ended up working out fine. I had to solder some I2C cables together in order to get the lengths that I wanted. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with it. It's comfortable. Yeah, it's working as it should. Okay, so I'm going to stop. I'm going to exit out of here. And just before I go into takeaways, I'm going to just show you, go a little deeper into my MaxMSP patch so you can see exactly what it does before I do a demonstration. So these are actually two different arpeggiators. One on the left side, the one I'm controlling with my left hand, on the right with my right hand. So there's keyboards. This note in is actually for MIDI. So I have a MIDI keyboard set up here, but if I wanted to, I could just like put in a chord there. And then this next section here controls the rate of the arpeggiator. So this slider. And you can even control, make it a dotted note, regular or triplet. This bottom section controls the direction of the arpeggiator. So this would be up. It's going from the notes upwards, down, and then up and down. And over here, I have just like a clear button that I have mapped to, here are the accelerometers. So this one is the first one, X, Y, Z. So I wanted to create a failsafe so that I could just turn off the sound. So I'm using the Z axis for that purpose. And the other two, the X axis is controlling the direction. Should be this part of my hand as it's going this way. And then the Y controls the rate. So it would be going like this. And then I have two proximity sensors. See if I'll stand up here. One is right at chest level. And then the other is on the stomach. So up here and here. And then here's my microcontroller in the middle, battery. And then just go, if you could go back, zoom in back to my screen. Yeah, thank you. So I also have two proximity sensors here as well that I'm actually this control out, CTL out object, I can choose to send it directly into Ableton. So here is my Ableton. Each arpeggiator has its own channel. Right now I can put any instrument that I want onto it. Right now it's an electric piano whirly sound, but that can be anything from this, from Ableton. And I also have a few MIDI effects here. So this is a bit of a cheat because I eventually want to have these elements be in the actual Max MSP patch. But these I do want to incorporate. So note length, this is when I change this dial here, that dictates how long the note is played. So it could be, if it's very short length, it would be more like a staccato. Longer, it would be legato. And then I have another one that's called chaos. So I love introducing just like randomizers into my patches or just music generally. So this would, instead of, say, if I played a C chord, C major chord, it would, if I change this chance percentage, say it's 50%. So 50% of the time, it would play a different note in that same scale or octave, but randomly. And then, if you don't add a scale to it, so this is Mixolydian, I can add whatever scale after it. So it will only choose whatever notes that are in this particular scale. So that's something that you can program. But eventually I want to add this into the Max MSP patch itself. So here's the whirly classic piano. This is the sound that is being generated. And the proximity sensors, one of them is controlling this effect right here, just the dry, wet signal, which I was able to map very easily in Ableton. It's just for controlling the dry, wet, which is like when it's 100% wet, then you're getting the full effect. If it's dry, then there's no effect at all. So it's basically that parameter is just turning on and off the effect. So that's the first channel. The second channel is the same, but the effect that I have for the second proximity sensor, this would be the one on the stomach area, is something called a resonator, which would basically be delay lines. The sound is sent into multiple delay lines that feed back on each other and create a ringing or oscillating sound. So it's very cool. I'd kind of planned these sensors. I was having a hard time remembering what they were, and I chose effects that I associated the area of my body with. So for example, the echo delay I put on my chest because it reminded me of like when your heart starts racing. So I could remember, okay, that's the one on my chest. It's like the delay is like my heart racing or some sort of like heart arrhythmia. And then the resonator itself would be kind of felt like, when your stomach makes weird sounds when you're hungry. It's like, ooh, like, I don't know. It's just having these associations with my body and the actual sound was very helpful. All right, so I'm going to give you a quick demonstration of this so you can see how it works. All right, so I'm just going to put All right, so I'm just going to do one hand to show you. So I'm just going to play. So this is my left hand. All the way this side is the rate is basically whole notes. And then as I shift it, so right now the arpeggiator is going down, but this goes up and then up and down. And then this one is connected. So this triggers the echo. Now if I want to just turn it off, I go like that. So I'm just going to do a quick demo of both hands together. Yeah, so that's a little bit of a demo. You can hear how like the arpeggiators are not actually in time with each other. I actually initially wanted to use a heart rate sensor to create a master clock that both arpeggiators would be timed perfectly with each other. But then as I thought about my body as an instrument, the type of music I like to create, and I thought, I want to make jazz, not techno. So I wanted that element of where they would be slightly off and you could hear almost these polyrhythms, or, you know, suddenly as I would change the rate, suddenly the one arpeggiator would go on the backbeat and be slightly out of time with each other. So I wanted to kind of keep that unpredictable element in with it. Okay, so I just have one last slide I wanted to share with you all. Okay, so just to end on some takeaways. So what I learned during this month-long residency that I'm super grateful for. I was able to do more of a deep dive into Max MSP programming that I hadn't done before, learning OSC communication. I feel like the short amount of time that we had this month for creating a project, I really had to learn things, specifically when I would run into a dead end, learning how to quickly pivot into something else, being resourceful. So these are, you know, definitely soft skills that I'm working on. Usually when I do a project, it takes me months because I do a lot of thinking. And then when I run into a dead end, then I have to think about the next thing. And wearable design was totally a new experience for me. I ended up considering so many more things about its usage, how I feel, how do I feel in my body, as I mentioned with some of the sensors, like as where they're located, in what region of the body, how it made me feel, what sort of filters I wanted to use that align with the body. And then just also preparing for potential issues with design and implementation due to the short time period. So as I mentioned before, sometimes I would stumble onto with something and then have to rethink it. But I actually, with this project, knowing I didn't have that much time, I immediately thought, okay, here's my plan A, and then I'm going to come up with a plan B, C, and D, and do those in order. And eventually, hopefully, one of those will work. And I have to say, pretty much all of my plan A's didn't work. So I had to do plan B, C, and D. And then lastly, something that I've already done before, but doing this residency really helped me with ask people who know things. So oftentimes when I deal with other artists, they don't really understand e-textiles or not that involved in it. So it was really great to be in a space, even for a week, with people who are engaging with this material, with e-textiles, with different technology, trying to think outside the box, problem solve, getting feedback on ways I can troubleshoot things. So definitely shout out to anybody who gave me some advice or helped me on this project. So what's next for this project? I consider this as a phase 1. It's, I would like to add more sensors and filters to the MaxMSP patch. And I want to I do have an Oculus 2 headset, so I want to experiment with the Bodies in X documentation to get some sort of visual feedback. And then eventually I also want to convert this MaxMSP patch into pure data in order to cut out the computer entirely. So yeah, that's it. And I just want to, lastly say thank you to all.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Lynn. That was such a riveting live demo. Everyone on Twitch was just getting all excited. So yeah, really appreciate you sharing your work with us. So yeah, I'll not be too ceremonious, and I'll pass it on to Michelle, but we'll regroup at the end. So thanks, Lynn, and welcome back, Michelle.
Hi, everyone. Oh my God, what an amazing lineup of projects to watch and then follow up. So I'm just going to jump right into it. Oh, let me share my screen first. That would probably help. Let's go with that entire screen. Bam. Okay. Great. So, obviously, I've talked about this quite a bit during the course of the residency, but as a quick recap, this month I have been working on my project Wingman, which is a multi-sensory VR game experience inspired by the idea of basically building a premise that would allow for strong external stimuli to give the player like a slightly uncomfortable sensory immersive experience, and also a slightly uncomfortable psychological experience, while also being fun and fast-paced and kind of goofy. And so the premise of the game is that the player is on a first date in a really nice restaurant, and they are compelled to try to impress the date. But the only way that they can do that is by eating a grotesque number of chicken wings and chugging milk and basically just generally being kind of gross and ill-mannered. And then the game really rewards them for that. And while all of this is happening in the headset, they're also smelling some strong smells, tasting some strong tastes, feeling some temperature changes, feeling all kinds of lovely things. So a quick recap of sort of what it was when I started. This was originally an idea that I had like probably 10 years ago, right at the beginning of when I had first like tried an Oculus. And then this residency sort of gave me the impetus to actually work on it. And I was a little bit nervous about the scope that I imagined for it. So I did spend some time in January working on it. So I sort of came in with like a really basic MVP, but the core mechanics of the way that it works are up at the top here, you've got your the timer. So this is a time-based game. I think timers add a lot of urgency, which is like a fun feeling that I like to inflict on people. We have the heat, which builds up as you eat wings. We have the impressiveness, how impressed your date is with you. The number of wings you've eaten and the money don't really matter. I think it's kind of some fun info, but this UI might get cleaned up a little bit more later on. And then down on the table in front of you, oh, and of course, center stage is the date. Even I forgot about the date. He's there, whatever. He is silently judging you. But then down on the table in front of you, we've got the magic wing button, which you can press quickly or slowly, depending on your play style, which spawns wings that drop onto this plate, and you eat them. And as you eat the wings, yes, very impressive, but it does increase your heat, which is something that you have to watch out for, because if you overheat, there's consequences. You can control that by drinking the milk, the magic milk glass, which caused me a lot of strain and stress over this residency, as well as the bowl of dip, which can be blue cheese or ranch. You can decide, because it's not real. So whatever flavor you prefer, it's that flavor. And dipping wings, there's a couple different kinds. One of them is really spicy. You gotta dip it, or else it's going to overheat you for sure. So that is sort of the core mechanic of how this game works. And so those basics are kind of what I brought into the residency. And then as far as the way that it evolved during the residency, when I was first doing the pitch, it really was very much software first. It's a game, and then this kind of goofy stuff is happening in the real world. And then we had the residency week, and I mentioned this change in my approach a couple times, I think, in the updates, but kind of being exposed to the concept of like all the Adafruit stuff and all these like really interesting, like the Singularity program really kind of expanded my imagination and got me really excited. And so I spent quite a bit of time like digging into some possibilities. But then I kind of realized at the end of it all, it has to tie back into the software. Like the software, the functionality needs to exist in order to actually connect to anything externally. So then I kind of looped back around and really focused mostly on building out the game itself. Unlike Max's experience, the technology was very hard for me, extremely hard. Some of the other questions that I had to ask myself were, how does it change from an activity into an actual game with winning and losing and tension and goals? When I first brought it in, people seemed very happy to like sit in a chair and just do this motion, but that isn't really, and by my definition, a game. So I wanted to, think about how do I make that transition from an activity of just, the mechanical movement into an actual game. Secondly, how to communicate the actual themes, right? How do I like bring the fine dining element, the gross elements, all of the things that sort of in my concept, how do I actually like bring those through and execute them on the software side? Something that I wasn't thinking about beforehand and definitely came up after watching a lot of different people play it is how to account for different play styles. As I click through, I think some of the videos should show this, but some people would sort of like sit there and, press the button and then a wing appears and then pick it up and eat it like they're in a real restaurant. And then other people are absolute monsters, which is how I imagine the player would act, because that's how I would act. But seeing that a lot of people had different inclinations made me realize that tuning this, like from a numbers perspective, it was a challenge to, and is an ongoing challenge, to figure out the way that I can make warning signs or any of the feedback, make it meaningful, whether you're eating one at a time and you're getting, 10 points of impressiveness, or you're eating 1,000 at a time and you're blowing the heat meter out. So trying to find a way to balance multiple play styles is something I'm still kind of thinking about. And then finally, how to make the player actually care about the date. Every single person that has sat down, they don't even really look at the date. Like they're just kind of, it's just about the wings, which is honestly, totally understandable. But obviously a big part of that is because this is early, this is a prototype, the date doesn't really do a lot, but still finding ways, not even just are they caring about the date, but are they caring about the UI and what's happening in the game at all, and just trying to find ways to bring the view up from the table in front of you out to sort of what's happening in the wider space. So some of the software upgrades that I worked on over the month. Firstly, super simple little asset facelift. On the left were the sort of chicken lollipops that I began with. And so I think these ones are much nicer and better representative. The scenery facelift, I think, it was fun. This is a pack for the most part. There's a couple things in here that I've modeled, but for the most part, it was a pack. It's kind of like playing The Sims. You're just like decorating this space. I did have some interesting revelations about like designing VR space and how much smaller I think it actually needs to be in order to feel intimate and give sort of that room scale feeling that I wanted. But also choosing, just bringing in that psychological element of like, oh, this is actually a nice place. It's not an empty room with just gross textures on the walls. Like to actually have that feeling of, oh, this is, I am acting badly in this place, really relied on, I think, an improvement in the scenery. So got that done and I feel great about that. Increasing what I would call the juiciness of the project, just sort of tying in more like corporeal elements and trying to find ways to represent that through like code and physics in the game. The first thing that I did was initially the button, you would press it and one wing would appear. Now it's anywhere between like 2 and 5. So it's kind of this big like spurt. And I think that also encourages people to move a little faster and be a little wilder with it. The sound effects I've built in, I think at this point, like it's a pretty robust set of sound effects. You can see here, this is just, I couldn't get the audio to work, but this is like a 2.5-minute track of me making various squelching sounds with my mouth. Almost the entire soundtrack is just like mouth generated and recorded, which I really like thematically. I think that works nicely considering, the nature of the project. We've got some particle effects, some like crumbs that, spray out of your mouth when you eat. And then I hope this is at the right point. So this is like a half formed, there's a lot of ways you can do a splatter, but specifically when I was designing the environment, I wanted like white floors, white tablecloths, lots of stuff that you can just make a really satisfying mess on. Max kind of started helping me out here. There's some wild behaviors happening. It shouldn't be colliding. They shouldn't be colliding with the wing and the splatter, but they are. I don't know why. But that's sort of the basic concept is there for, again, just making it like a little bit messier. There also needed to be more awareness. Initially, it was literally, I had some color changing stuff. Obviously, you've got these bars that are increasing and decreasing, but it just wasn't enough. Like, again, you're not looking up there, you're looking at the table. So trying to find a way to be like, hey, something is happening when, for example, your heat is increasing to a dangerous level. So this is, Kahani helped me out a lot with this, with the post-processing. And I think that it's a great, so this, it flashes faster the closer you get to the maximum amount of heat. And then there's also, this is still slightly not quite there yet, but there's some piano music happening in the restaurant, and I have tied that to the impressiveness. So as you eat faster and faster, like the piano gets faster, but on the low end, it is deeply like, it's disturbing. It's kind of like Satan's music box of very low, like down pitched. which is pretty funny, but I don't know if it's quite the vibe that I want to go for. And then finally, I'm looking at potentially taking the UI off of like the world space, which is, you know, it exists out there, and actually attaching it to the camera, more of like a HUD in like a video game. I mean, this is a video game, but a not 3D video game, a not VR video game. And I think that will potentially make that information more available. Oops, no, stop. For the structure of the game, there were also just, you know, when I came in, it wasn't, there was no beginning, there was no ending. You never lost, the timer would end, and nothing really happened. So I built in sort of a grand gesture to open the game. So you load in and nothing's really happening until you have the dome in front of you. And I think it's a very natural thing to like take the dome and pull it off. And then there's a wing there, and the action of pulling the dome off kind of kickstarts everything. And then to close the game as the timer runs out, I'm very happy with this. I got this little receipt situation working. There should be a little like kind of receipt printer sound. It's not captured here, but then it will print your score, and eventually if I come up with any sort of like you know, bonus points or anything like that, it'll be reflected there. As far as new tech, the project sort of gave me a reason to dig into a bunch of stuff in Unity that I had, like, I was vaguely familiar with, but I really hadn't pursued too seriously. The first thing is the post-processing camera. Sorry, for anyone that knows Unity, this section is going to be pretty like elementary. But for anyone that doesn't or is looking to learn, there's some cool stuff in here for sure. The post-processing camera essentially allows you to do almost like basic photo editing, like anything, a lot of what you would do in Photoshop, you can apply to either a specific local space on your screen or the full camera, the full game camera. So on the left, you can see that's with no post. And then on the right, this is with a few filters on it. So it's just kind of making it look a little bit more like vintagey, a little bit more like old money, I think. But that is the main reason that I dug into that, was to get this. The red flashing is the post-production camera. And that is something that is, once I actually dug into it, relatively simple and very powerful. So I'm really happy that I know about that now. Particle systems, Jessica helped me. She kind of like flagged this as an option, and we dropped one into the scene. And then later I was playing it and I was like, why is there snow? Why is there snow here? What's happening? So you can kind of see a little bit. This is another one where it takes a little bit of like finagling. You can put a lot of numbers in and not much happens, or not much seems to change. But once you actually get the once you find the sweet spot, you can generate a lot of really great effects. Collision layers are basically a really broad way to stop things from interacting with each other. You can sort of make whole categories. This really just felt like getting out of my own way learning this. I had done a lot of very strange and not efficient workarounds that this system is literally designed to handle. So that felt very powerful. And then also, I never used the cloth in Unity. So we do now have a bunch of haunted tablecloths that just kind of always like flow a little bit. Oh, no, stop, please. Okay, I hear music. I don't want to hear music. No, okay. We're gonna stay on this slide then.
We don't hear the music, Michelle.
Oh, you don't hear it? Okay, it's really, really loud for me. So hold on. Exploring the sensory part of the project was really interesting. I didn't have as much time as I wanted to dig into it, because I did feel like I needed to focus on getting the software to a certain point. But there's sort of a spectrum of ways And on, you know, the one side, you have like this thing is the smells of food, which is something that's very accessible, and it's you can easily just have like what smells like a chicken wing will chicken wings do. So that is something that could, in theory, just be brought in, but obviously it's like gross. You're dealing with germy stuff. It burns. It you know, the smell fades over time. Like there's a lot of reasons not to use it. And then on the far other end of the spectrum, going towards like a much more chemical content. So I found someone who actually made this amazing. I guess this was like their company. I think this site is from '96 or something, and he just has this massive list of scents and flavors, and then breaks it down by like what specific compound is responsible for this smell or this element of smell. So on the other end is pursuing a more like chemical base. So whether it's, you know, oils that are brought into a perfume or a candle or something like that. However, I spent a lot of time looking. I found this is actually a great site, and they have a lot of very weird scents that you can get. And I do think it's an avenue worth pursuing, but most of the smells that I'm looking for are simply not commercially available. And I think I would have to buy them in like 10,000 like liter, I don't know, drums or something like that. So I think I'm kind of settling on a middle ground where it's like we are using shelf stable things that are, yeah, just cleaner, cheaper, and the stability is an important factor for sure. It did get me to sort of think about like what is the true target smell? What is the true target taste? Like we're not, when you are smelling a chicken wing, what is that? I got a little bit caught up on like, oh, how do we get like a chickeny smell? But really you're not smelling chicken when you smell a chicken wing. It's really, you're smelling hot sauce, and you're smelling fried oil with like stuff in it. And so pivoting over to, okay, how do we capture those smells instead of like hanging up too much on the chicken? Which brings us to the delivery mechanisms. And it gets a little bit complicated simply because like when you're burning things or heating things, you can't like a candle, needs very specific, you know, kinds of fragrances, like kinds of fragrance oils, and how much of it can be in the candle. Similarly, when you're talking about making any sort of like candy or gummy that I was looking for the hot sauce, there's only a certain amount that you can put in before it starts compromising the structure of what you're creating. So that's something I'm excited to play around a lot more. I would really like to come away with some like small packageable things that I can almost make look like a little restaurant mint, or a little restaurant kind of like, I don't know, like a fancy soap or something like that. So speaking of next steps, I would say I'm calling this, as it is now, about 60% finished. There's definitely more in-game mechanics that I want to build out. Obviously, the multi-sensory stuff needs to be, I've done like a little bit of testing. I made a couple of prototypes. Lee really inspired me with the molds. I really like the idea of doing a custom mold kind of situation. The game overall just needs to be polished. And I've been sort of deliberating back and forth about where and how is this game showcased. And on the one hand, I love the opportunity to do the theater and really emphasize all of those immersive aspects with an in-person opportunity. But I think that those are pretty few and far between. So to me, it makes a lot of sense to essentially make like a branch where I can tweak a couple of things, like a tutorial or you know, whatever I need to do to make it more appropriate for an in-person. But at this stage, I think I am building it out to be something that someone can download off of Itch, put on their headset, and play. And I do really like the idea of having like a little kit that I could, give to someone, and they can like, okay, I'm going to heat up this little wax melt. I'm going to eat this candy. I'm going to have my look through. I would love to do a zine that sort of, has like the restaurant's menu and like the instructions and things like that. So I would really like to keep developing that. And then finally with Bix, we're going to be hopefully doing some of that extension and actually taking some of the physical stuff and bringing that out to, some of the software functionality and carrying that out to physical stuff as well. So that is me.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Michelle. Everyone is so excited about the wings. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to invite the last 6 speakers back into StreamYard to join me for just a hot second. And so as we're wrapping up, and yeah, turn your cameras on. So as we're wrapping up, I just want to say that this has been, a very short time. We chose the shortest month of the year, although we do get to celebrate this lovely leap day. But it's just incredible to see how much progress people have made over the course of this very short period of time. So so yeah, for the we're just going to do a quick go around of the folks that we didn't get to do a Q&A for, and just have you say just one comment, and we'll follow up with future conversations, but we want to make sure to release everyone into their evening. But I just also wanted to acknowledge kind of the generosity of this group in terms of really sharing widely with each other and inspiring each other and teaching each other and teaching us, and just to thank you also on behalf of the Bodies in Play team and also the Bodies in Play network, which continues to grow. So we will just do a quick go around. I'll call on people, I guess. Yeah, because that's efficient. So if you want to say a last thing about your work or the residency, or a reflection you had about common themes or inspirations, or any thought you have about bodies embodiment or possible futures for the extended BIP network, anything is game. But yeah, we'll do it from there. And so, Olivia, would you start us off?
Sure. I think it's really interesting how many different projects incorporate sound, which is just something like I said, I'm not a musician. I don't think about sound ever. I try not to because I find it very frustrating. So I think it's really interesting to see, I don't know, just people go about it in so many different ways. I think this month has been a fantastic time to, Kate, you said something in one of the one-on-ones where it was this is like residencies are time for artists to feed themselves. And I think I've said that to 3 other people so far. So I'm passing the message on. And so it's been a really nice month to feed myself in terms of working in collaboration with Shalaka, learning more about sound and physical computing, and then also just to explore more weird types of pattern making. Thank you, everyone, for your contributions. It's been a really cool time getting to know everyone.
Thanks so much, Olivia. And is Shalaka on right now?
I am, yes, just no video.
Yes.
Yeah, I feel like, yeah, something that I've been really just delighted by is everyone's willingness to play. And I feel like play has just been so designed out of our lives that being able to witness it through all these different dimensions has been so wonderful. And yeah, just sort of encouraging me to sort of take up play a bit more, because I feel like I do structure my life around, or maybe don't bring it into my life as much as I can. So that's just one thing very briefly that I've been thinking about. And yeah, it's been so nice to hang with everyone, and I'm really grateful for the residency for bringing Liv and I together. So yeah, I will leave it there.
Thanks so much, Laka. I really appreciate that. Lee Wilkins.
Yeah, sure. I had so much fun meeting everyone and seeing all the different things everyone's doing, and I really love that a lot of the projects do involve like non-visual things in a lot of ways. It gave me so much to think about. And yeah, like I feel like the second half really got bogged down in like being in the weeds and the technical, with not as much like output to show as like the first half. But it was really great to share that time with the other residents in the studio, like physically producing things, getting to like engage and ask a lot of questions. And yeah, I mean, like I love all of the different takes on the same prompt. I always love residencies for that kind of thing. So yeah, just happy to be a part of it.
Awesome. Thanks, Lee. And Lynn.
Yeah, I feel like in a theme that I picked up throughout the talks tonight is just when designing wearables, designing something from the body for the body, using intuition as a major kind of like compass towards for these projects is really a takeaway that I'll have from this experience in my own project and just learning about other people's projects. But yeah, generally I had a great month. It was so awesome to meet you all and to be in Toronto. I'll definitely be back in Toronto. We'll hit you all up for sure. But yeah, it was a great learning experience. And I want to thank you all for just being open-minded and welcoming. It was definitely a safe space to experiment. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Lynn. Max?
Yeah, I mean, I'll echo all of that. It's been lovely. Thanks to everybody for being cool and doing cool stuff and also being nice. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like part of my reflection on the residency at large is like it's very nice. Maybe this is attached to the whole like feeding yourself situation, but like it's very nice to have a space that exists outside of all of the rest of the world and the things that it wants from us and our production, especially in like a marginalized people context. It was very refreshing to be able to just be like, I get to just make whatever I want and I don't have to justify this. And this goes to like a little bit what Lee was saying about like not wanting to be a insert marginalized title artist or whatever. And that being like one of the currencies that we have to trade on out in the world. Yeah, and it's been a long time since I just like hung out in a space where that was just, and maybe this is because like everybody involved is a marginalized person. I think I was talking about this the other day with a friend where I was like, it's just been a very long time since I've been in a room with like exclusively people that have some like base potential shared experience, and therefore a lot of introductory conversations do not have to happen, and a lot of like prefacing doesn't have to happen. And so I feel like that's the part that felt like was feeding me. So thank you all.
Thanks, Max. Yeah, those words resonate. Michelle.
Yeah, I will further echo Max's echo, and just, it was really wonderful for me to be able to step into, this world. And, especially as someone who's sort of getting started a little bit more in what I'm doing, I feel really inspired, and also like all of these things are so much more learnable and so much more like possible and accessible than I had like perceived before, having, such like a great opportunity for exposure. And to just like talking to everyone and getting to know everyone. Everyone's been so wonderful. And I just want to say, I had a really great time this month. thank you so much to the team. I know this is a tremendous amount of work, and really, like, you guys execute on the idea of like empowering and inclusivity and accessibility in such an impressive way, just in the design of this residency and the way that you guys approach it. And I know that that takes a lot of work and effort and time. So yeah, I really appreciate it. And I'm just, yeah, glad I got to meet everyone and participate.
Thank you, Michelle. And we've managed to get our other two residents back in. So Jessica, do you have a last thought you'd like to share?
Yes, thank you, Kate. Thank you for all the team from Ellie, always present in the emails, in the detail all the time. Everyone very helpful, very generous to give a lot of reference knowledge, and the freedom to create whatever we want to create. Like Max said, I mean, I have the tremendous opportunity to have the time to spend the entire month in Toronto. I'm from Argentina. Yeah, I am living in this space where I'm living. I'm still here. So thank you. Also, the fellows are. I mean, I'm very happy. Like you know, when you find your crowd, the people who really understand you're talking about. This is amazing. So thank you a lot.
Thanks. And then Kay.
Yeah, I feel like I'm really just gonna echo things that everyone else has said at this point, which is like, thank you so much for like all the work that the Bodies in Residence like team put into it. Like, this was a really, really amazing experience that I was super grateful to be a part of. And also, like, to the fellow residents, like, everyone is so cool and working on like such thoughtful, amazing, fun work. Like, literally since I met everyone, I have like not shut up about how cool everyone's projects are. Like, every time I'm interacting with someone, I'm like, you should see this thing and this thing and this thing. And like, even just now while I was like on Twitch, I like texted my partner who's in the other room, and I was like, get in here, you have to see this, there's such cool stuff being demoed. I'm just like so excited to have met everyone. And I also feel like I'm at kind of like a weird place in my career, which is to say I'm like very early in it compared to a lot of folks. And this has just been like really inspiring and exciting. And I'm like so excited to like continue to spend time with this group and like see the work that we all do moving forward.
Amazing. Thank you all so much for these amazing words and for your amazing work. I love that we turned a Q&A into a love fest. So obviously, you know, I think this is the start of a conversation in a lot of ways. Like, there's so many things to pull on from here moving forward, but I really appreciate you all taking the time and the energy, you know, to engage in this conversation. You know, just on behalf of Emma and Cindy and I, we just really appreciate it. And I just want to acknowledge, you know, like the awesome collaborators we've had on this project throughout the years, you know, across, you know, DMG, and also our amazing research assistants. It's just been kind of awesome. So just to have all 8 of you join the BIP team has been a real privilege. So we will be updating the bodiesinplay.org website with information about the residents project's work. We bought a domain name this week towards the end of our 3-year project, so that's my big shout out. I also want to give a big shout out to Julian, who's been doing a bunch of work in the background in terms of like making us be on the internet, which I apparently don't know how to do. And also a massive thanks to Ellie for coordinating this residency and Bodies in Play in general. So thanks everyone, and we will be in touch soon. And thanks everyone who joined us tonight. Have a beautiful evening. Stay embodied.